Good evening. I just wanted to say hello. Then I'm going back to silent. This is Rahima. Hi, Kelly.
Hi.
Councilwoman Oliver, how are you?
I'm sorry, did I hear someone speaking?
Yeah, we were saying hi. Hi, everyone.
You're saying hi. How are you, Councilwoman Oliver? It's Rahima.
How you doing? How's everybody?
Good. How are you?
Great.
Good. Everyone's great.
There's Councilwoman Gray.
Hi.
Good evening.
Testing.
Give me 1 minute to pull up the agenda and then we can get started.
John Park.
All right, thank you for your patience. We can go ahead and get started. So welcome to our Community Development and Urban Planning Committee meeting. This is our second one and last one of 2020 before next session. This evening, I'll start with introductions from council members.
Hi, Xanthia Albert, 3rd District.
Yolanda McCoy, 6th District.
Linda Gray, 1st District.
Michelle Harley, 4th District.
Samuel Guy at large.
Great. Thank you for all council members introducing themselves. And our committee liaison, can you introduce yourself as well?
Yes, Rahima Jabarbe, City Council staff.
Thank you. And Rashima Dixon at large, chairing the committee this evening. We will jump right into it. We have 3 agenda items for this evening, and we're actually going to start with a resolution approving the disposition of a lease for 615 South Church Street to Future Soccer Stars Foundation. Who will be speaking to that this evening?
I will, Madam Chair.
And who is, oh, I'm sorry. I never see Commissioner Williams.
Yes. Good evening. Kelly Williams, the Commissioner of Public Works, and I'll be speaking to this resolution. 615 South Church Street was purchased in 2016 as part of our wetlands project. The northern portion of the property is actually being used for the wetlands, but the southern portion was used simply to provide equipment storage during the construction of the project. Mr. Moderator, if you could just show slide 1. So as you can see, we're talking about the red blocked area. And at this time, Public Works doesn't have any plans or a budget for the land. So we'd like to lease it to Future Soccer Stars Foundation for the creation of playing fields. There's no cost to Public Works for the creation of the fields, and Future Soccer Stars will be responsible for the maintenance and any improvements. The lease rate we're looking at is $650 per acre, or $7,800 per acre per year. The area is about 3.5 acres to be leased, and that will generate about $27,000 annually. I'm going to ask that Mr. Sean Park of the Office of Economic Development step in, and he can show you some more visuals of the proposed project.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. My name is Sean Park. I work as a project manager for the Office of Economic Development. And Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity to present to the committee. I will be presenting a few visuals which show the 615 South Church Street property in context of South Wilmington, just so that the committee can get oriented with the property. Commissioner Williams already explained this image, which shows the property highlighted in red, and it is surrounded by the South Wilmington Wetlands Park to the north, and the 76ers Field House to the left, and the Christina River Bridge to the far left. Mr. Moderator, if you could go to the next slide. The next slide shows a recent image taken in 2020 by Diamond Construction, which shows the current purpose of the property highlighted in red to the right of this image. So the current purpose of this property is a laydown area for the construction ongoing on the Wetlands Park. And the Future Soccer Stars Foundation is seeking to lease this land once the construction for the Wetlands Park finishes. Next slide. And early plans for the Wetlands Park show the entire parcel, which is highlighted in yellow. And this is approximately 6 acres. And the top 2 acres of this parcel is devoted to the Wetlands Park. And the Future Stars Foundation would only lease the area in red. Next slide. And discussions around transportation to the fields are ongoing at Wilmington Initiatives and DelDOT. What's currently being considered is a connection between Southbridge and the riverfront by way of C Street sidewalk connections to the east gateway of the South Wilmington Wetlands Park, and then a shared use path connecting the east gateway to Garish's Lane, and then a sidewalk completion from Garish's Lane to the existing sidewalk on South Walnut Street. And this will enable pedestrian and bicycle access from C Street to the Wilmington Riverfront by the Christina River Bridge. Next slide. And possible designs of the playing fields include an east and west orientation for the 2 fields. Next slide. And a north and south orientation for the 2 fields. But the project design is not finalized because Future Soccer Stars Foundation is first seeking City Council approval for the disposition. And now I will turn it back to Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Sean. I appreciate the slides. Madam Chair, if you will, I'd like to have Steve Cavalier come and speak about the organization and what their mission is. Moderator, if you could let Mr. Cavalier in.
Think I'm in?
Yes.
Great, thanks. Madam Chair, if you don't mind, I'd like to introduce Jay Wesley, Lamar Mason, and Gordon Murray. If you would be so kind to unmute them as well. And when we get them unmuted, Jay, if you could start off by talking about the programs we have here at the field house.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity to speak here. One of the things that we were really interested in was community impact, especially with I'm going to speak largely to lacrosse here.
Wait a minute, excuse me, Madam Chair. One person was introduced and somebody jumped in. Can they introduce, what's going on?
Yep, sorry. My name is Jay Wesley, Director of Operations for the 76ers Fieldhouse and BPG Sports. I largely largely oversee a lot of the field space usage as well as the lacrosse program at the Sixers Fieldhouse. I'm going to speak a little bit as to our community impact, what we've done so far, with what we've been able to do with the space that we have currently, and how this impacts our future plans for community engagement. So one of the things we were really excited about was partnering with an organization called Sankofa, which is all about serving under-recognized youth. So we were able to give away $20,000 worth of goods and U.S. lacrosse memberships, which includes insurance for whenever they play lacrosse, wherever they're at. So we're looking to continue that relationship, make sure that that's a strong presence at the field house. We also have the DLL. So DLL, Delaware Lacrosse League, is a league that allows high schools in the area to join the league and compete against each other, which from an individual cost perspective is relatively, say, a club.
Somebody needs to mute
Lacrosse
their phone.
teams. So that number continues to grow. We've had about 14,000 players in and out over the past 2 years. So we're looking to continue to grow that and making that an available option for those that are interested in lacrosse. We also have, we actually also got mentioned in U.S. Lacrosse Magazine, November edition, which I think speaks largely to the inclusiveness of our programs, and also kind of their trajectory of what we can do and what they believe we can do. And I kind of want to speak to what more fields, what does that do for us in terms of our community engagement? It allows us to work more closely with outfits like Delaware Lacrosse Foundation, where I've been a board member for a few years now, 5 years. But being able to work more closely with them and surrounding community centers to make sure that we're providing programming that existing programming, providing them with better areas of play and higher quality fields. Right now, they're playing in community center gyms and things like that. So looking to work with them to get them on site regularly, different things like that. Those are kind of the things that I wanted to touch on. Goran Murray, who's the head of our Phantoms Lacrosse Club, he's going to speak a little bit from the club perspective.
Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Goran Murray. I'm the director of lacrosse over at the 76 Fieldhouse. I've been here for a year now, from the past coming August. And we've grown lacrosse pretty substantially in the past year. We started with 2 teams, stemming at 20 kids per team, so 40 kids within the program. This past fall, we've grown throughout the year to 4 teams with about 22 kids. So we're averaging around like 85 kids to 90 kids within our program. And that being said, we also look to diversify the game of lacrosse. I would say we have a very diverse program in itself with our players. And I would like to say that our coaching staff within the tri-state area is probably the most diverse staff. And we're looking to branch lacrosse within the city and make it accessible towards everyone and anyone that's looking to play the game of lacrosse. And the more field spaces would be a huge benefit to the growth of lacrosse and soccer and other field sports within the area. But within that also being said, we also look to scholarship a lot of student athletes within our program. And with the scholarships, we've been able to give those kids a quality opportunity playing the game and an opportunity to branch within the sport they might not have tried. In the prime example, we have a student that attended Mount Pleasant High School. His name is Nasir Obey. He's a class of 2022 junior. He's been with us for the past year. He's a kid that's never really played lacrosse. Within the year, He's developed tremendously, and right now he's looking at some major universities to possibly continue his career as a student athlete. So that's pretty much what I got based on the cross program that we have at the 76ers Fieldhouse.
Would we be able to turn on our
Hello?
Give us a minute.
Yep, no problem. Hey, Goran, can you speak a little bit to ETC and kind of our involvement with them?
Yeah, so ETC, another youth lacrosse program. The mission within that program is predominantly African American. I've actually been working with those young gentlemen for the past 3 or 4 years, and they are heavily involved within the 76ers Fieldhouse. Considering we practice there, we'd like to consider them kind of our station in which we practice, we film there, and we sometimes even meet to just parents, go over logistics, and the Fieldhouse has been a huge benefit to the ETC program. With that being said, I'm also involved with Jamaica Lacrosse on the international side of lacrosse, and Jamaica Lacrosse within the next coming months will be looking to use the Fieldhouse and the fields as an opportunity for tryouts for our national team in the upcoming 2023 World Games.
Another thing that we've been doing, we haven't been able to do it just because COVID's kind of messed it up, but working with Jamaica Lacrosse to have them on site. Goran is an athlete of theirs and captain player, so bringing high-level talent on site, giving young men and women, different, saying, hey, anybody can really play this game, play at a very high level, so they can, see that, be around that, ask questions to those guys, and have a rapport with them. So one of the really good things that this facility has done for the inner city youth, if not, the youth in general in the area, is provide the access to some of these higher talented individuals or people who have been there, done that, having them on site in their home state, in their home city, see them, talk with them, and stay in contact with them. So people are really gaining lasting relationships here that are really going to put them forward. And I firmly believe lacrosse is an interesting sport in that it provides you with a lot of unique opportunities that you wouldn't otherwise have. And that's just the state of lacrosse as it is right now. The connections that you make, the friendships that you make. No one's going to lacrosse as of right. No one's playing lacrosse as of right now. By and large, there's a good amount of people that are to go play professionally. A lot of people, the main focus is to go to a top-notch school or to play at the highest level, and those schools are the Dukes, Syracuse, Notre Dame's. So it's a really something that I really believe in strongly, that this is a real opportunity for kids and young kids to take advantage of. I feel like we're doing that now, and I think we can do it even better with the addition of those fields.
Oh, and the addition of the fields, Jay, sorry to interject, but just the idea and the proposition of possibly having some prospect days for some larger universities that are farther away. I've been approached by Michigan University's head coach, Kevin Connery, who I played for at the University of Maryland. He's looking to have a prospect day for Michigan lacrosse, which can open a door for other Michigan prospect days for other sports. So, and that's kind of the route that'd be a positive route for us to go in with more fields.
Lamar, if you don't mind, Lamar runs the Czech Rock League. He's the owner and operator of a basketball league that we run here at the facility, at the 76ers Fieldhouse. Lamar, if you wouldn't mind just briefly talking about the kids you work with and the league itself.
Yes. Hi, I'm Lamar Mason, one of the lead trainers here at the 76ers Fieldhouse for BPG Sports. And I've basically created a league in 2015 that has been constantly growing not just of the kids or the youth around in Delaware, but basically the tri-state area, Philadelphia, Maryland, New Jersey, and yeah, that's really about it. I have about 180 kids in my league about every year. And I had 18 sponsors this small business and entrepreneurs like myself this year for our fifth season. Due to like COVID, it kind of put a dent in things, but for the most part, it was still very impactful for the youth in the community. A lot of kids know of my league. I also train, like once I did state, but I train a lot of high profile athletes as well as beginners, as well as beginner stages. Currently have some high profile athletes playing in college basketball right now at the Division I level. A lot of training goes a long way, and it's not just about basketball. One of my mottos is it's bigger than basketball. It definitely helps. It helps a lot with the kids as far as like it's an outlet. Basketball was an outlet for me once. Still is. As far as like some of these younger kids within the city of Wilmington, they definitely see it as a way out. I mean, anything else you would like definitely want to know about the league or training, feel free to ask me. But I definitely think it's a good thing. It's definitely a good thing. Like a lot of kids, a lot of parents, they ask me about a lot. You know, not even just pertaining towards basketball, but just like life situations with their own kids. You know, how to even go about things. I'm a parent myself of 2 sons, and I know how it is. You have some parents that train their kids, but sometimes they just want to keep that parent and kid relationship, which is also important, which why some of them actually bring them to me. I just think it's a good thing all the way around. Once you have like good programming implemented, sky's the limit for these kids.
Great. Thanks, Lamar. Some of the other things and events that we've hosted for the community include food drives. We've done 6 of them this year. We've done 5 blood drives. We've had open gym for the kids. We do EKG screenings where they can come in, get an EKG on their heart for the kids. We did a Cancer Cares pink car parade. We've also hosted a Sankofa lacrosse that recognizes underserved youth. We did a Shooting for the Stars free basketball clinic. We did the City on the Pitch, which I'll speak about more from an FSS perspective. And one of the things that we're most proud of as well is we've given over $65,000 in scholarships for kids to play sports. That includes soccer, basketball, lacrosse, and we've given over $50,000 in kids to participate in our camps. So we feel very proud that we've been able to offer over $100,000 to these kids that normally couldn't afford it, normally couldn't play in a facility as nice as this, that we offer this opportunity to everyone, not just the people that can use it. From a Future Soccer Stars perspective, Future Soccer Stars was created about 4 years ago, where we first started at the Fletcher Brown Boys and Girls Club. It kind of was a bit of a pilot. It was created in the idea that all the children should have the equal opportunity to play soccer, but not just soccer, but all the vital tools that sport and soccer offer to kids. What we found is that the kids really enjoyed it. It's a free program we run. And what we did from there is once we found out that the kids liked it, we reached out to H. Fletcher Brown Boys and Girls Club, the Clarence Frame Boys and Girls Club, the Latin American Community Center, Kingswood Community Center, the Hilltop Lutheran Neighborhood Center, William Lewis Bilingual School, Servium Girls Academy, and then the PAL, the Police Athletic League. And what we do is we offer these opportunities. We go physically to their location and we provide soccer services to them free of cost. We have licensed coaches who coach some of the best athletes in the country and not just the state, who work with these kids. And some of the things that we provide are enjoyment. So the idea to play a sport to enjoy it. And then we offer the guidance portion of it. And then from there, if we see that the kid really excels and wants to continue to play, then we can offer a pathway through a scholarship that we would pay for them to participate in a club or whatnot. I think one of the things that people confuse Future Soccer Stars with is that we're a soccer club. We're not. We're purely a program for at-risk youth to provide an opportunity of soccer for them. If they want to go further with it, we help them with that by providing that pathway or that scholarship for the kids. One of the other big events that we've run at Future Soccer Stars is we call it City on the Pitch Play Day. Last summer, we had over 800 kids come to the 76ers Fieldhouse, where we had a really fun day. We worked with Delaware Art Museum. They did an art project. We had some entertainment through music where the kids can hang out and dance. We provided food for them. And we played some soccer with the Philadelphia Union team. They brought a bouncy moon and things. So it was a great day for the community that we brought basically all the kids from the Boys and Girls Club, the LICC, the Kingswood, Hilltop, Servium, the PAL. We brought all of them in to have a fun day at the field house. The fields, the addition of these fields for us, for Future Soccer Stars, is really to grow the program, right? We would love to get into the South Side and help those kids. We would like to create a rec program where a lot of the feedback we get from the kids is they like to practice and it's fun and it's great, but they really want to play games, right? I mean, everyone likes to compete and play games, where we don't have a field to do that currently, where if we add these fields, we can create a rec program for the kids where they can actually play games against each other and whatnot. And then we can create a real pathway for them as well, because you would go from recreational to a club to travel or whatnot if you want to, or continue through that rec pathway. So for us, from the Future Soccer Stars perspective, the fields really open up the opportunities to reach a lot more kids and provide that guidance and that pathway and that enjoyment of the game for many more kids than just the kids that we currently work with.
Thank you. Is that the end? I just don't want to cut anybody else. Is that all for now?
Yes, that's all for now.
Yeah, I've got one thing.
Rob, if you can introduce yourself.
Hi.
Yeah,
Hi, Rob Buccini, calling or zooming in. Thank you all for your time this evening. The location here was one that we're extremely excited about. FSS, Future Soccer Stars, and BPG Sports have been looking at a location in the county, and we're not aware of a parcel of land that would fit our needs in terms of size. And what happened was Jeff Flynn introduced this site that was being used for construction laydown area, and we had laid it out. And what we're excited about as we hopefully pivot from building these in the county to the city is the access to all the city residents that have been using the facility. And as all of my colleagues had mentioned, we do a huge amount of football, obviously lacrosse, basketball. The fields allow us to amplify what we have already been successful in really just a year and a half we've, I think, created a tremendous amount of hometown pride. We have not turned away one child, one student athlete because of funding. We've helped people that can't afford to make it to the next level, as Steve said, scholarship people, to help them get to the next level. And I think what's most important is that people who are on the screen here that run the field house, they're really inspirational for the young men and women that walk through the facility. And also, they'll maybe see a 76ers in the building, working out in the turf area or Titus or one of the G League people. So I'm super excited about having this location just because of the proximity to where so many of our athletes come from. And as we mentioned, or I think we may have mentioned, at all times, we have at least 1,000 children from the city that are playing in the various leagues that we have. As we mentioned, for example, the City Basketball League, we have three hoop courts for basketball, but we only have, the two fields, which are always packed, and we use them for training as well. A few questions that were asked in advance of this were, parking and neighborhood involvement. And from a parking standpoint, we will tie in, the parking lots at the 76ers facility will be used as the primary parking for these fields. And the way that people will get from the 76ers field house will be accessing the already designed elevated walkway. I think Sean or Jeff can talk about that. That is being built. So they'll park in our facility. The walkway comes from the new bridge to South Bridge. It connects them. So we'll get on there and we'll direct all of our people. We built the field house to have extra parking. These fields don't generate a ton of traffic just because typically there's only each side is 11 on 11, and when you have subs that might be 30 people on a field a time. A lot of the kids are may come, they're not coming in a car, or they may come together in groups. Our neighborhood involvement will continue as the people mentioned. One organization we didn't mention was Neighborhood House in Southbridge, where we have children that are from there. One of my colleagues, Sherry Young, who lives in Southbridge, her son was just selected to be on one of the basketball teams down at the field house, which is exciting. Our involvement at BPG is we're going to provide the funds and the money to pay for the lease to FSS. So the project will be in excess of $4.5 million, $4 to $5 million construction project. So we will put that up to build the fields, and something that we're very passionate about, and think that the project so far at the field house speaks for itself, and all the not-for-profit work that Future Soccer Stars does, I think hopefully speaks for itself. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for the presentation and in-depth regarding all the work that the field house is doing, and also what will be happening with the actual fields that are being asked to be leased. I do want to recognize that we've been joined by Council President Shabazz, and then also Councilman Bud Frio of the 8th District. We do have a couple of hands up, so I'm going to go to Councilwoman Gray, and then Councilwoman Oliver, if you still have a question, I can come to you next.
Thank you, Chairwoman. One question was answered, which was about parking. My other question is, how long is the lease? And can this property be subleased by the foundation? And I think the other one is who is managing this? Is the city going to manage this lease?
I can speak to that. The city would not be managing the property. The Future Soccer Stars would be doing that. We just don't have the capacity to manage the actual playing fields. The lease, I believe, Jeff Flynn, you know, how long is the lease for? Jeff? Is Jeff on mute? Oh, okay.
Yes, he's on mute.
Moderator.
Pardon me, Kelly, and that the lease is a 35-year lease.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Follow up.
Mhm.
And can, I might have misspoken. Who's the landlord of the property? And can the foundation sublease the property during that 35 years?
The Department of Public Works is we own the property.
You're the landlord. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And then no, I do not believe there's a sublease option.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gray. I'd also like to recognize that we just been joined by Councilman Vash Turner of the 5th District as well. No problem. Is it Councilwoman Oliver, did you still have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes. My Council Linda Gray, Woman Gray just asked a question. I was going to ask how long was the lease. And I guess I want to make a statement that I'm impressed with the 76ers overall, the whole stadium and the workers over there. As hard as they work, and just with the hard work and the assistance that they have given to a lot of our youth in the city. I've been able to participate and take some youth over there and receive some tickets for various programs. And I really was impressed with the program that Steve mentioned, when all the different centers from all over the city, and just see how excited the youth was there, all the youth who had turned out in the games and activities, and a lot of tokens that they had given away. Let me see. I was really going to ask about the lease, but that question's been answered. Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Thank you. Councilman Guy.
Yes, Madam Chair. When the presentation started, it was mentioned that there was a lease. And I listened to the whole presentation. And then finally, one of my colleagues had to ask, how long is the lease? Which it was kind of odd to me that that wasn't part of the original presentation. Once this question was answered, a 35-year lease, this whole thing causes me some concerns, but I'm gonna separate it into two parts, because I played soccer and I taught kids tennis, soccer, and basketball. So from that perspective of the project, I like it. The aspect of the project that causes me to have some concerns is somewhere in the resolution, it says that upon the declaration of a property as approved for disposition by resolution of City Council, the Department of Real Estate and Housing may lease property owned by the city to a nonprofit organization. So I guess one of my questions is, has that already taken place? Has the city council declared the property as approved for disposition by resolution? Have we already done that?
Not that I know of, Councilman Guy.
Well, I mean, the people who are putting this up, the person who spoke to this in the first place from Public Works, I think they need to let us know.
Good question.
Commissioner Williams, did you have an answer to that?
I don't. I would have to defer to the law department. I believe that section is referring to what the, what the code speaks to and real estate and housing, this is a property owned by the water department. It's not owned by real estate or and housing. So I don't know, I would have to defer to the law department to determine whether or not disposition actually needed to occur first. It's sort of a square, a square peg in a round hole, but the entire purpose of this resolution is to go ahead and do that disposition regardless, of what the code says with respect to real estate and housing or public works, right? So that is what we are doing now.
Okay, well, just so that you know, at least the copy I'm reading in the whereas clause, it's talking about the Department of Real Estate and Housing may lease property owned by the city to a nonprofit. So is that the transaction, or is it a public works lease?
Well, it's definitely a public works lease. I mean, maybe the whereas clause is I didn't catch that when reviewing the whereases.
Okay, well, I'm gonna move on from there. I'm gonna leave that there for a second. Also, the other question I have a couple of them that relate to the transaction, not the recreational aspect. So when I hear, I'm kind of familiar with this area because I keep kind of a little map over the last 15, 20 years of what speculators are buying land and how land exchanges and moves from this person to that person. And there's been a whole big land use speculation game going on in Greater South Bridge, going all the way back to the 80s. And so even this particular parcel of land, do you recall how much the city paid for this property?
I don't. It was part of a larger package that was, I can get that number for you though. What we
I think what you might find is it may be somewhere in the neighborhood of $365,000. And the city bought this land. Now, at one point in time, when the land use attorney owned this property, we received tax revenue from it. I forgot the gentleman's name back in the day, but he was a land use attorney whose name shows up on a lot of properties of land in and around Wilmington over the last several decades. And so now we're getting to the point where there's no tax revenue because the city bought it for what's purported to be $365,000. So now we basically, by us buying it, we're playing Monopoly. We're not playing sports. Okay. We're playing the Monopoly game in and around in that area where there's efforts to control every parcel of land. So now when I hear the deal is that we got a corporation who's going to pay the rent for the nonprofit to lease the land that the city owns. Well, how much money is the city getting each year from this?
So this resolution speaks to allowing for the lease to be negotiated. What we've landed on is $650 an acre per month, which is about $27,000 annually.
$27,000 a year?
Correct, yes.
Okay, but is there some type of agreement that's already been reached?
No, that's why we're
upon this.
enter into negotiations. we need your
Okay.
permission.
So,
We can do it.
well, no, you don't need our permission to enter into discussions with folks. You need our authorization to actually execute a deal. So when you say $27,000, if we pass this, you could rent it to them for $1 a year. So when you all say these numbers, unless you have some type of agreement that's been entered to, that's contingent upon council authorizing this, those numbers really are worthless numbers for you to be saying to us. So essentially you have the corporate agent that's putting up the money, so they're actually able to control this valuable piece of land by making a donation to a nonprofit. And then what happens later on in the deal for 35 years? So what this does is it allows this land to be sat on as long as somebody's willing to pay the monthly fee, so that as the value of land and property in the vicinity increases, folks have been able to hold on to this without really having to spend any of their own money. It's an age-old game of coming into communities and putting property in the hands of nonprofits and similar type organizations, and they sit on it for 20 or some years, and then the corporate people come back and say to them, okay, now we want that land for what we want to do. So if the sports facility there decided they want to double their size in 10 years, the land has been held on to at the city's expense. So these aren't new games. These aren't new games that are being played here, right? So I like the recreational part, but I don't like these kind of games that are played in and around the South Bridge community and in and around Wilmington. Anywhere that looks like in the future something good may happen, the monopoly games kick in. Now, the other thing I need to know is, or to share with you is, before this COVID, I regularly would drive by that recreational facility there to see who the kids were that were outside using those recreational facilities. And I can't tell you who was inside, but I did not see any kind of substantial diversity on the outside. And I took pictures. So I just share with you that whoever is making those kind of representations in the past or for the future, you might want to take some pictures on a regular basis, because right now, that's not what is regularly seen there. Of course, we're in COVID now, so that's a whole nother situation.
So let me just get to some of your issues. First of all, the city maintains the ownership. So the corporation will never be able to control what happens on that land. The land is zoned an O, which means it can be a park use only. Also, nothing can be developed on the property because the Army Corps has restricted it. More than 30% of the land is wetlands. So there are very, very limited uses for this land. We, the Department of Public Works, have gotten more than its value by having to, be able to use the land for the equipment that we needed to build the award-winning wetlands park. And we think this would be a good use for it. I mean, frankly, like I said, buildings can be put on it. It's zoned O. It's for park uses only. It connects the neighborhood to, more of the riverfront. And so, I'm here because we feel that this is a great value to the community, to Public Works, to the city, and it's a win-win-win in every way you can think of.
I'd like to speak.
I don't doubt your comments with respect to the recreational component of it, but the land use, land control, the fact that you said that the economic development guy had a conversation with a particular group of people, because I've not read anywhere in the public domain that this parcel of land was available in case anybody had any use they wanted to make of it. And you all didn't say that in your presentation. So was this ever posted so that other people who are engaged in recreation type activities had an opportunity to indicate what they might want to do with this property? Was it ever put out to the public?
I would have to defer to economic development, but
Well, I'd like
not
an
to my-
answer to that question, because if it's somebody doesn't say yes, then this is the kind of backdoor land use stuff that's problematic in the monopoly city. So you started the presentation as the director of the department. And so
Commissioner.
you should be able, you or somebody that's with you should be able to tell whether this property was made available to the whole society, to see if there was other people who had plans that they might want to present.
Right, Jeff Flynn can chime in as the Director of Economic Development. Just to be clear though, to my knowledge, it's not required to be put out. I know nothing in the code that would suggest that.
That's not the answer that you really want to give, because what that does is it essentially proves that properties are disposed to people who are on the inside without people who aren't on the inside circle getting the opportunity to know about it or present their plans. So if you want to say it's not required as a representative of the mayor's appointee, and that's how you all are able to just slip this property to who you want to and nobody else, I don't know that's the answer, but that's your answer. You gave it. I want to know
Well,
what's
the answer
made
is really
available to the public.
a win-win project for everybody. Public Works had purchased the property for the purpose of the award-winning wetlands. We no longer have a use for it. This fits in exactly with the zoning, and it's a lease. So
And
if I
does anybody
decide
else want to do something
that
there?
we don't want soccer fields any longer, then we can go ahead and terminate that lease. I mean, the city remains in control of what the property is used for. The agreement just really allows us to, claw back some of the money and create an opportunity for citizens in the Southbridge area to have access.
I think you missed
But
my
I mean, I
point.
get what
You
you're
didn't-
saying. So you feel that we're being nefarious, but I
No,
can
no,
attest
I'm
that
saying to you that I'm asking you a question. Did you all make it known that
Not
this
to my knowledge.
property was available?
Madam Chair, can Jeff Flynn chime in, please, Madam Chair? If Jeff Flynn is on there, is he able to answer that question?
Yes, he has his mic open.
Yes, hi.
Oh.
There was a legal notice published last week that the city of Wilmington is looking at a lease to lease this property. But with regard to the councilman's questions, the opportunity presented itself with a company, a foundation and a company that has the wherewithal to make these improvements on the land. There are very few, no other company has come forward, organization has come forward to do this. So like the commissioner said, we thought this was a good opportunity to partner up with somebody who's got experience building fields, who's got experience managing fields, who's got a foundation to provide scholarships and equipment and overall experience in getting this done. Are there other organizations out there that could do this? I don't know. In Wilmington, there might not be. we haven't been approached by one. And these things aren't easy to build. They're not easy to maintain. The city certainly doesn't have the money in its general fund to do this. So it seemed like this was worth pursuing. And that's what we did. We took an opportunity, researched it, worked it out, and it seems like a win-win.
It seems like a win-win if the requirement is that in order for somebody to get to use that property, right, they have to be on the inside in the inner loop to the exclusion of everybody else in the world. And then it has to be financed, a nonprofit financed by one of the monopoly corporation groups in Wilmington, Delaware. And it's never good for a city to be dependent on just one organization that gets to control who can do what and who can't. So they're dependent on receiving $27,000 worth of donations, or else they have to leave. So that means the property's basically held at the whim of the city and the organization paying the rent for them. And nobody else had an opportunity to get that kind of sweetheart deal, principally because the city did it secretly and in the back. So I'm gonna leave it at that. So the recreational part of it is great. The monopoly component of it is what I've come to expect in the current city of Wilmington environment. And that's dead wrong. But the recreational part is good. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Guy. Councilwoman Gray.
Yes, thank you. Two things. I would like to make sure that the city's in safe harbor, that they're not liable for any injuries that occur on this property while it's being leased. And also, I would like a copy of the documented terms and conditions prior to this going to council for a vote. Yes, no?
Sure.
Sure.
Yes.
Thank you.
The legal, is there anybody from our law department on the phone, on the Zoom call, Madam Chair?
No.
Okay. Madam Chair and members of the committee, Commissioner Williams and I will see to it that you get that question answered. Having worked with the law department and done leases with the city will be indemnified as it is in all leases for injuries occurring as a result of the use. We'll make sure we get that language to you.
Thank you. As well as the conditions, right? Yes. All right.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, this is Marshall. I just wanted to mention that this legislation is scheduled for this Thursday's council meeting as well.
Okay, so then that means that will have to be expedited in order to get it for Thursday on time. And then also I would say too, to the point what Councilman Guy brought up in the resolution, if we can go back and check and see why it says Real Estate and Housing Department instead of Public Works, if that needs to be changed.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you. Councilwoman Harley.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to say that I had the opportunity to speak with Steve, the executive director of the foundation, and I had the opportunity to learn about the foundation in terms of the work that they have been doing with our at-risk children. I wanted to know the history in terms of what locations have they been actually taking this program to. For example, They were going to Hilltop, to the Servian Girls Academy, the Powell Center, Browns and Brown and Frames, Kingswood, William Lewis, and of course, there's going to be a strong effort made towards the neighborhood house as it relates to our children that are marginalized, and I guess in some cases you can say disenfranchised. So my first concern was a little history as it related to when you say marginalized children, where are these children coming from? How do you market the program? And I really felt good about what they have have been doing, this organization, as it relates to what the program that they are offering the children. So I really think that it is a win-win when we think about who's being serviced. Let's see, the city of Wilmington will be, it will generate revenue for the city. And of course, whenever there's money generated, it helps to definitely stabilize our tax base. And not only is it going to be good for the children of Wilmington, but it's also going to be good for economic development. When you think about soccer games, we'll have visitors coming in. Our restaurants will be able to capitalize off of it. Our hotels will be able to capitalize off of it. So I see it as a win-win in terms of a revenue generator. It's going to be over right there in Southbridge. And when you look at the parcel that we're talking about, it's not anything currently on that land right now. It's owned by the Public Works. The zoning is one that we know that nothing can be built on it. So I just, when I spoke with Steve and got the background as to what they have been doing, what they plan to do with this, I was very comfortable with it. Now, when it comes to the 35-year lease, I'm just curious as to when I heard the numbers in terms of what they will be paying. When you think about that over 35 years, okay, will that price increase? I mean, today, it's what was quoted per year, but if you multiply that times 35, I'm just wondering, how will that look later? So I guess what I'm saying is that I think that we need to make sure that the city of Wilmington will continue to be able to capitalize off of the revenue as we progress over the years. And that's pretty much all that I have to say. So I'm definitely in support of the legislation, and I respect the questions and comments from my council member colleagues. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman Harley. And I think too, I know that the wetland park closes technically at dusk. So I think I asked this question to Mr. Pacini previously, but will that affect the hours of when the games will happen? Or will they happen prior to the wetland park closing, or how will that work as far as the hours of operation?
Yeah, I didn't know. We'd like to go later, especially in the summertime, past 6 p.m. So I'm not, Madam Chair, I was not aware of the 6 p.m. dusk. So that's something we probably need to talk about that, just because, especially the summer hours are, later. And two, I just wanted to clarify three things. The first is it will not just be for soccer. Obviously, Jay and Gorin have a large growing lacrosse program. We do a lot of football down at the field house. And one of the reasons for the longer term lease is that the fields will cost between $4 and $5 million to construct. And so in order to be able to spend that kind of money, you just need a longer period of time to amortize that over. And I do really believe that the field house is one of the most diverse places in all of Delaware and all of the city. It is, I have the same amount of pride in the field house as we did when we built the ShopRite. And, very similar, people had suggested, oh, the ShopRite will never work. And we had an incredible passion to deliver the ShopRite into what was then a food desert, get the lobby, the state and Delta to have the buses, come back and forth into different parts of the parking lot there. And I do think that the same thing will continue here at the field house as we're able to grow a little bit with some more outdoor space. I think, will allow us to attract more and more students. So, and I just wanted to give a shout out to our team, figuratively and literally at the field house, the gentlemen that have been on the call, and they've done an unbelievable job in a very short period of time, and they have done a great job in providing a safe outlet for all types of student athletes, be it basketball to football to soccer to volleyball. We do not have one documented case of COVID transmission down at the field house, and we have about 1,000 people a day on a busy day come there. So they've done an unbelievable job. It's been incredibly stressful for them. We're certainly under the microscope with Department of Health because of the amount of people that come in. But like I do say, like just the having the G League team there and the Sixers down there, I do feel like it's given us an incredible amount of hometown pride, and something that I couldn't be more proud of. And then again, back to the team, our team that's on the call. This is their first city council hearing experience, so they've not only have they learned a lot about running a business, because those are the team there is really who runs the business and are responsible for the P&L, but now they're getting a lesson in legislative affairs as well. So it'll be fun when we see each other on Wednesday morning. That's something new to talk about other than COVID. So thank you, Madam Chair, for hosting us.
Yep, thank you. And Councilwoman McCoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question is actually for Commissioner Williams. My question was more so about the construction of the field. So if the foundation gets a chance to construct the field on this wetlands area, if that construction actually makes any difference or changes toward the area, maybe, I don't know, because of the fact the wetlands was about making certain that we dealt with flooding and things of that nature, who will be responsible for making, those corrections or changes? Would it be the lease, the person who has his lease, or would it be the city?
So not the entire parcel is being leased. It's only the area that's needed for the fields, and that's more of a flat highland area. The lower part, which is more of a wetlands area, is still being maintained by us, the city, for the purposes of the wetlands park. Does that answer your question?
So you're basically stating that exactly where the location of the field is, you don't believe that that's going to be an issue? Right.
No, there's no building, right? It's fields.
Right. It's just going to, no, I understand it's just fields, but I don't imagine that's like just planting grass seeds though. I'm like, there'll be something, some other little, something will be installed, whatever, put in the ground or whatever, in order to make certain that you solidify this area. I was just wondering whether or not if that small thing made any change or type of change to that area. If it,
No, I'll have to submit plans and we'll look at it, and we'll have, the engineers look at the hydrogeological aspects of it and to make sure that it doesn't add or subtract from the purpose of the wetlands.
Okay.
Certainly not. But we do believe, like on the surface, that this is a good fit. They will absolutely have to build a foundation, and then I don't know if they're going to be turf or grass, but the wetlands is complete and an entity of itself, if you will.
Okay.
And so everything that we add to it will not subtract from any of its purpose.
Thank you. That actually answered my question. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. And I saw that Councilwoman Gray had stated, will the area be fenced in? And will the community have access to the field?
We will, like the field house, outdoor field, there will be fencing to keep the balls in the area. And there will be a path that connects to South Bridge that's currently designed, and that will be constructed. So you can easily walk through from South Bridge to get here. And that's, part of the attraction of the location for us. But it won't be, we'll have ball stops, but there won't be, 30-foot high fencing around the complex for sure. The fencing will be very similar to what we have down at the field house. We'll have cameras down there for safety, and also for slip and falls and things like that.
Thank you. Councilman Guy. Councilman Guy, you have to unmute.
Thank you. For the commissioner, is the city spending any money paving streets in connection with what's taking place in this area?
No.
Okay. And is the city spending any money in connection with sidewalks in connection with what's taking place in this area?
No, actually, we're looking towards for some state funds actually to help with the connectivity issues, right? So trying to connect South Bridge to the field house to the other side of the riverfront. So the state is contributing in engineering and development of that.
Okay, and is the city spending any money in connection with drainage issues in connection with what's taking place here?
I don't think so. I mean, we're not, so the purpose of the lease is that they are going to develop what they need for the fields to be functional, and we don't have any out-of-pocket costs. That's the beauty of this.
Is the city spending any money in connection with the pathway that was just mentioned?
No, that's, like I said, that's coming from state monies. We are spending money with respect to the South Wilmington project, but not necessarily the pathways to and from this particular field. However, there is state money that we hope will be involved.
And how much state money is being put into this project and the related transportation?
It depends how much the state's willing. So they've already committed a number to help with the connectivity between, A streets and C streets. And then one of the projects is to help, there's a sidewalk that ends near C Street that's a sidewalk to nowhere that we would like to connect to the South Wilmington wetlands. So the connectivity issues that we're involved with deal more with the wetlands than they do this project. Although this project fills a gap, right? So there's the South Bridge, and then there's this property that we purchased but didn't involve in the South Wilmington wetlands. And then there's the field house. So this project will fill a gap, and we would like that connectivity as much as possible. We want people to have access. We want people to be able to walk and move and bike and do, get around without having to use a car.
It's, I'm gonna repeat again. I like the recreational aspect of the whole project, but I don't like the monopoly aspect of it. And I also need the public to understand, when you see all of these kind of subsidies coming in from the state for private, in a sense, to benefit private groups of people, no matter what they're doing. And then you say, well, how come I got streets that need paving and things of that nature, and they tell you there's no money? Because when the state sends this money, whatever they send there, they count that against what goes in the neighborhoods of Wilmington. And so the people of Wilmington just need to understand that that's how the deals go down now. The money comes in not for the general public's use, but for the use of specific insiders to do what they want to do. No matter how beneficial it may be, they count it against the people of Wilmington as having received this assistance. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilman Guy. We do have a member of the public who's had their hand up for a good amount of time, so I'm going to go to them next. And that will be Brian O'Neill.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. I got to tell you, this is an exciting project. First time in a long time. It's a breath of fresh air. I'm partial to lacrosse in particular. I have two boys that went through some other programs, and I'm sure both the gentlemen who spoke early familiar with Dukes and NXT. When you're talking about some of these youth sports, it's just not a matter of getting kids off the street and keeping them active. It's a matter of progressing that child on to college if they can. These sports give an avenue for kids to have visibility with recruiters. And if you've ever been to, again, a lacrosse game, there could be 50, 100 recruiters on the sideline from every level of a child's academic ability. And you're talking about different divisions, Division 1, 2, or 3. And if you have the right group of people coaching on the athletic side and then coaching them to the academic side, these kids can go out and get real nice scholarships, not just not just the athletic portion, but also on an academic side. And I think this is a great venue for them to be able to do that. So kudos to you guys for doing that. I hope you can figure out a way of getting this past council. And I'm just a guy in the public that's all for it. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. Is there any other public comment before we move back to council members? Next hand up, Chris.
Yes, hello. Thank you. I appreciate it. And much to Brian's comment, I want to talk about the exposure to the athlete at a young age. I mean, the club sports and collegiate sports and the exposure to them through club sports has always been from a United States perspective, it's a pay to play community we're in when we look at ourselves compared to the rest of the world. And it's a shame. And I really love to see even club organizations and those affiliated with them taking a step to actually get those that don't have that pay to play environment around them to get the exposure they need to really show and showcase their talent. So, the more that we have as far as, let's say, even just acreage to allow those sports to take place, I'm all for it. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Chris. And next, I think Don had his hand up next.
Yes, I like to say that I'm all for this project also. I have one point I'd like to raise. I kept hearing the different community centers that were mentioned in various parts of the city. And I'm assuming that the community centers are serving as feeders for this. And I kept hearing, every other part of the city has a community center where the youth can go to possibly be fed into this versus over on the east side. And the east side doesn't have one. I would like to know, and I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but are we getting any youth from over on the east side? Are you guys doing demographic things like zip codes or address to find out what parts of the city these youth are coming from? That's my only concern. And I just like to see us have some kind of feeder mechanism, center, system over on the east side if we're not getting a lot of youth from the east side to participate in those programs. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. And does anyone from the field house want to respond to if they're the east side question?
We track.
I can.
Yeah, I'll let Steve speak. We track City of Wilmington. I don't know if we track per neighborhood, but I'll let.
The foundation does. We track their zip codes, and we actually, if you go to our website and go into programs, we have a virtual map that dots where they all are. And Don, to your point, one of our goals is to encompass the city as a whole. So this project helps us do that.
Thank you, Steve, for clarifying. All right. Council President Shabazz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate everyone's insight and concern about this innovative project that's coming to the South Wilmington and the adding of more fields for our young people. I think all of us know the importance of having opportunities for young people to engage in some form of sports, what it does for their character, what it does in building teamwork and all the characteristics that build a good person. There are I know that before we had so many community-based football teams and the teams were having to go outside of the city of Wilmington to practice. And this way, having these extra fields would give us an opportunity for those teams to now be able to stay right here in their own neighborhoods and practice and have easier access. It also enables us to get into some tri-state competition. My brother was a referee of a flag football group that traveled around the East Coast, and they wanted to come here into Wilmington, but we didn't have enough fields for us to even get into that kind of arena of competition and camaraderie. That not having enough fields, we lost out on the popular economics of families coming in and staying at our hotels, eating at our restaurants so that their children can participate in competitive sports. So this just opens up another ecosystem for our young people to have and to engage with others, to get into the competitiveness, to be proud of themselves as being on a team and having others come here to Wilmington. So I'm glad to see that we were going to use that old area for something constructive, and appreciate the conversations and making sure that it is a good and equitable deal. Councilman Guy, I appreciate your looking at all the I's and dots all the T's. But I think this is something that we really should not let this opportunity passes by when you have all the resources that's going to fit something that's beneficial for the most precious commodity we have in the city of Wilmington, and that is for our children. So, Madam Chair, I ask that I also could be added. I think I'm already a sponsor on this legislation, and pray that our council members do this for our young people. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Council President. And yes, you are already on there as a co-sponsor. Me as a sponsor. Yep.
Thank you.
And Councilwoman McCoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I just kind of wanted to piggyback on what Mr. Farrell stated, and say that East Side, when it comes to community centers, they are very similar to my side of town as well. So I think that I did hear when you were mentioning like places that you were recruiting, I did hear a school. So I just wanted to put out there that maybe Bancroft and Bayard will be schools that you will look into when it comes to recruitment. I said, because those two areas, because these two areas lack really community centers, but yet they have like the bigger schools right now. So just wanted to make certain that you were aware.
Yeah, thank you, Councilwoman McCoy and Councilwoman Harley.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. As it relates to the East Side, I think the same conversation that I've had with the president of the Blue Coats as it related to how we could make sure that the children from the East Side were included with a number of activities going on at the 76ers. We had talked about a bus actually coming over to the East Side, a bus picking up children on the East Side at Bancroft, and also picking up the children at the neighborhood house in Southbridge. So I will definitely have this same conversation with Steve as it relates to how we can definitely include the children from the East Side. That was a conversation that has already been had as it relates to making sure that the children from the East Side and Southbridge are included in these activities and opportunities. And again, I will make sure that I have that conversation with Steve for the children on the East Side. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman Harley. And Councilwoman Oliver.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to echo what Councilwoman Harley stated. In the past, we did have some youth from the East Side that came from the YMCA. So I was able to work with the Y, and they did take a bus down there. So I don't know if that was, how that was factored in, but I do want to say at some point in time, some kids from the East Side did attend some events down there, but they came through the Y. So it made, from the YMCA. So they are not forgotten. Thank you. I think we could do better, but I just wanted to put that out there. I would like to be added as a co-sponsor.
So noted. Thank you, Councilman Oliver. Are there any other questions from council members? All right, seeing none. Again, this is a resolution, does not have to be voted out of committee, as was stated earlier from our chief of staff. This will be on the agenda for December 3rd, which is this Thursday. Thank you again for the presentations from the Commissioner Williams from Public Works, Director Jeff Flynn from Economic Development, as well as our Blue Coats, our field house folks who are all on the phone as well, in addition to their fearless leader right now, which is Steve, who's leading the charge in that area, and also to Mr. Pacini for also joining us this evening during the presentation. So again, thank you again for that, and we will move to our next agenda item.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yep, thank you all. Our next item on the agenda is substitute 1 to ordinance 18-41, which is for the local hire policy. I just wanted to clarify for last meeting, It was not voted out of council based on the fact that it was based out of committee, based on that it was 2 yeas, 1 present and 1 no. Based on that, it was not voted out of committee. So that is the reason why it's back on the agenda this evening. So I just wanted to make that statement for clarification before we dived into that piece of legislation. Councilman Guy?
Yes. You know, we've discussed this almost feels like 4 years, trying to get it to a spot so that people could obtain the benefits of this program. And so we had a full hearing. Anybody who wanted to participated. We've had multiple hearings and heard all kind of comments from folks anywhere and everywhere. And so I don't know that there's a whole lot more to discuss. There's a whole lot of people who want to exploit Wilmington, and they're the ones, some of them are the ones that are doing the most to try to make sure that there's not opportunities for people. So I always find it interesting when I just see people going out their way to keep people from who's hurting from getting a chance to benefit from these type of programs. I usually say that on city council here, over the years, we do a whole lot of voting, but we don't get to do a lot of voting about things that directly try to impact folks' lives. So this is operation legislation in a monopoly community. And the monopoly community has sent each and every agent that they have to try to undermine. Some would stick their head out and speak on the record, and others would sneak behind and whisper in different council people's ears and tell them to oppose it for their reasons. And so at this point in time, I think pretty much everybody knows what they're going to do. So I don't really not see a whole lot of reason to rehash anything other than this is designed, which I believe it should be, that when we take city resources and somebody wants to use our city resources, then the question is, okay, well then what's going to be the benefit for the people in our community who's hurting? That's a fair question. And so there's a whole lot of districts that are full of people doing well. And there's a whole bunch of districts that's full of people who's hurting. And so at the end of the day, we all do what we think is best to do. And that's all I have to say about it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Guy. Are there any questions from council members? All right, seeing none. Is there any questions from the public? All right, so before I go back to the public, I'll go to Councilwoman Gray first, and I'll come to the public afterward.
I wanted to comment that, yes, I do understand that this would help a lot of the young people who need jobs. But I also have heard, like you said, from a lot of small business people who feel that they would not be able to benefit from city money if this was law. They can't afford to hire an apprentice and also hire a journeyman to train the apprentice for a year or two. And I've had a small business and I would never be able to afford to hire anyone, let alone hire someone and then have someone train them the entire time. So unfortunately, I think this is more exclusionary than being inclusive, even though you are attempting to find jobs for our younger people. I just wanted to state my position. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gray. Mr. Don. Lee?
Yes, I'd like to say that it really pains me when I go around the city and I see different construction projects going on. And when I look at the cars that are parked of the people that are working at these sites, and most of them are from out of town. And I don't see anybody a lot of times that looks like me working on these sites. And I think that this is something that really needs to be addressed. When I look at that construction that was happening up at that building, up at 8th and Market, and I didn't see anybody that looked like me. Now, I didn't go inside, but on the outside, folks doing any work or anything, I didn't see anybody, any youth, and that was a big project. CBDG money, and it's like maybe it needs to be tweaked, but if, like this legislation is proposing, if city money is being used, then there ought to be some mechanism to include some folks in there, some young folks, some apprenticeship folks, besides just pushing a broom and besides doing the labor stuff, doing some meaningful work where they can gain some skills so they can one day be one of those trades people. We need to do something about it. And if folks want to use the city money for a project, then I think that ought to be one of the requirements. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Don, for your comments. Is there any last comments from council members? All right, seeing none, is there, I'm sorry, Councilman Guy.
Yes, I'll close it out, Madam Chair. At this point, the community was fully involved. We had probably one of the hearings with more people than there's been at most hearings in City Hall in support of what this legislation is designed to do. And the council member made a comment about small businesses. And if she would go back and ask those small businesses, how much money are they getting from the city now? I'll bet a whole lot of money that they're not getting anything from the city, because there's only a select group of people who get city money, because we get a printout whenever we want it of who's receiving subsidies. And it's not small businesses. But those same folks, they're not here. It's folks who want to call up members of council to try to get them to not support legislation to help the people hurting, but they won't show up and say what they have to say, because we met with some small business people who had some questions. They had been told by some people with some power why they should be against it. But because they knew us, they met with us. And we went over the program and they recognized this didn't have nothing to do with their life, because they don't get anything anyway. So the community was involved from the beginning, and I'm gonna have to report back to the community about what's being made available to them. But when you see in Wilmington, the current where people are starting to engage in more direct action, Okay, when you see that start to build up, and it's building up, that's a failure of the government to help create opportunities for the people. So if the people gonna sit here, and there's two things that gotta take place. If the people gonna sit here and watch this videotape and say, wow, those folks voted for council to decide whether we're gonna have a program designed to help people, or they're gonna say the group of people on here tonight made it so council couldn't even vote on whether to try to help. That's what they're going to see. And I'm just saying to you that, so you're voting on whether to let council vote on it. But if you want to prevent council from voting on it, you have that right to do that too, as is always the case. But people are marching, they're getting upset. And if they can't get help legislatively and through programs, then they have good reason not to have hope. So you just think about, I hope you're thinking about what you're saying to folks. So we just sat here and we just agreed to allow something out of here to let a developer donate money to a nonprofit so the nonprofit could control the land, so that if in 20 years the developer wants the property for their use, they can stop donating the money to the nonprofit and have the city sell it to them. That's what we just did. All under the explanation of recreational opportunities, which I said are all good. But part of this is about A and part is about B. And this is another example of an instance where a lot of the monopoly players don't want to see operation designed to try to help people out. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Guy. Councilwoman Oliver.
Yes, Madam Chair. I wasn't going to say anything, but I have to say something. I am a certified union lady. I want to show my identification. I'm certified to 2024. So I'm for anybody. I love unions. I worked down Local 199 before. I worked with John Blythe with 55 before, and various other unions over in Jersey and in Philadelphia driving cars. So I am a union person. But when I met with two union individuals who stated 38 other unions that they represent were not asked to help. I mean, I was pressuring them because I was trying to figure out what is going on. And I took some notes. He says 38 other unions that he represents never was asked to help or see this draft of ordinance. And they were very disappointed that nobody reached out to them with this new draft of ordinance. And they even stated that in this, that they spoke to Secretary of Department of Labor, ex-secretary from Department of Labor, Sharon Kay, who also voiced some of the same issues, that he thinks this legislation is not ready to go, just the way it's worded. So I'm just saying, based on meeting with the two union people who state who are fact, have 38 other unions under them, and Sharon from ex-Department of Labor, Sharon Kay, also stated it's all in the letter, and he stated it. So he sent him an email over. I would be in support of this, but I can't be in support of it tonight based on all this. It's a lot going on with the unions, evidently. So other than that, I would be in support of it. But based on the two union reps who are in charge of the unions, and I'm not in charge of it, and Sharon from Department of Labor, who have some issues with this, and it's all in writing. And I sit there and talk to him, because that's why I asked to meet with him, because I was wondering what was going on. So that's why I can't support this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Oliver. Council President Shabazz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There has been other sessions of councils that have worked diligently in trying to address the lack of opportunities for some disenfranchised portion of our community. We've been working on this for 16 years I've been on council trying to get this straight. And how do you do it? How do you help the disadvantaged without making it so that it becomes and hinders the opportunity for it all to happen all together? So, I mean, I understand and appreciate your intentions. Councilman California and Councilman Kelly and I worked diligently before trying to do something similar. But it does not, but we haven't gotten it right yet. And we're finally getting more small contractors engaged in business and opportunities here in the city. So to add this on as an extra weight to them would be kick all the progress we've made in that arena, kick it back a couple years. So I hear what you're trying to do. I've tried it myself. And I just believe that we definitely still need, which I thought was going to happen, was going to be a group of all the possible stakeholders involved in this, union, non-union, small, large contractors. We're going to sit down, and because everyone wants to do exactly what this intention is trying to get done. But we can't do it by cut off our nose and spite our face to get it done, just in the name of getting it done. So I agree that there needs to be more work done to this piece. And, and I think that the answer is out there with compromise and inclusion and trial and error. But I don't think we're there yet. And I too will not support this piece of legislation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council President. Any other last comments from council members? Councilman Turner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to, Councilwoman Oliver gave the name of Secretary of Labor Sharon Cade, but didn't give the names of the two representatives from the union. Are we putting that in the record as well?
No.
And why not if you're making it public?
Well, if you would, I said their names on the last one, so look at the last meeting.
Well, this is this meeting, so we're doing this meeting for this legislation today. You put hold on. We put on the record. Madam Chair. Can I continue?
Yes, and I believe she was about to tell you the name.
I was just trying to be cracking a joke, but I thought he was being sarcastic, so I was being sarcastic back because I thought he was at the last meeting. So I apologize for that.
No, I was at the last meeting, but we're talking about the legislation today. So
right,
it's to know who's on the record for today's meeting. So who are the other two union representatives?
That would be Jimmy Marvellis and some of his team.
So just Jimmy Marvellis? No, I mean no one else. You said two.
Yeah, it was. You asked me. I'm putting Jimmy Marvellis on the record. I'm not putting the other person on record. You give Jimmy a call and he can tell you. So
no, that's not. I'm just asking. I mean, you said it was three people total.
So you could give him a call. Thank you.
Understood.
Okay.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. I believe the executive director of the AFL-CIO, Mr. Marvellis, sent a letter to all members of council to be put into the record. So everyone should have a copy of his letter and his concern, speaking on behalf of the many unions that he represents from the AFL-CIO.
Thank you, Madam President. But I was just going off of what Councilwoman Oliver spoke about today. She said two representatives of the unions from that weren't from here. But now it's a person that was from here. But that's fine. I mean, if you don't want to give the other person that we're talking about, that's fine.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. I'm sorry if you misunderstood. I never said that. I said I asked Jimmy, could I meet with him to see what was going on with this legislation? And he brought another gentleman in. And I'm just saying who I met with, because that's who I asked to meet with. So no, I didn't say they were out of town. So I never said that. Maybe he misunderstood. I said I worked for several unions that were also out of town in Jersey and also in Philly, just driving car shifts. That's what I said.
Oh, thank you. Okay, but yeah, you also said the team when you referenced the other person. So I understand. It's just a lot going on. So that's fine.
Sorry about that.
Thank you, Councilman Turner. Is any other questions from council members? All right. Seeing none, is there anything last, Councilman Guy, or can we go to the vote?
Yes, I'll close out, Madam Chair. Okay, so as I said in my opening remarks, we've had a multitude of open public hearings. So people are shouting out the names of people who have never attended any one of the multiple meetings on this topic. Never attended one. And we're in COVID. Never attended one. So now Saran Cade's name is going to be thrown out there. So I'm going to call him within the next couple of days and ask him, was it his objective to undermine this legislation? I'm going to ask him that directly. And if he tells me yes, then I'll know that that's what he did. And if he says that's not true, I'll know that as well. He knows how to zoom in on these meetings. He goes to them all the time. So if he in his capacity sought to undermine this legislation, he was the Secretary for Labor, which means he spent his whole last several years of his life before he got this recent promotion trying to figure out new programs and new ways for people to have opportunities, to have careers. So I find it hard to believe that he would have actually been trying to encourage or discourage members of council from trying to put in place a program to help people. Secondly, Jimmy Marvellis. I find it very interesting that everybody that's on this Zoom meeting knows that out of almost all the unions that exist in America, the building trades are the unions where there's very few Black folks. Black folks have a hard time even being able to apply. They even have a hard time having an opportunity to know when to apply and who to contact. It's been a long-term historical progress of no Blacks hardly getting any kind of reasonable opportunity to be in the building trades. Now, instead of him helping to get more Black people in the building trades, he's here apparently through a member of council trying to undermine people who are hurting have an opportunity in the residential construction aspect, which the building trades aren't even involved in. That's not what they do. They do plumbing and carpentry. They're not residential construction unions. So why are they undermining an opportunity for people to get good training at a decent pay so that they can have an opportunity for a career? He's the same guy that was supposed to provide opportunities for people of color to become members of the building trades. And he's not done the things that he's supposed to do to make that happen. So why does he care so much to undermine a program that's not even a whole lot of money involved in? What is his interest in undermining people getting help? Because if you all remember 3 years ago, we were sitting here as a council learning about all of the people in our community who were getting abused by these nonprofits with these fake apprenticeship programs and fake certificates. And Saran Cade was involved with us in helping to resolve that stuff. And part of the goals that were set out was for people to go through vetted programs that weren't fake programs. And there's still a lot of fake programs going on now exploiting people. So all I'll say to you is if if the people in our community who's hurting, having an opportunity, if they're not stakeholders, then there are no stakeholders. So if the little guy can't get help from the legislative body, then they just won't get no help. But don't get mad at them when they realize, like, wow, they didn't even want us to have a little bit of an opportunity. Because they are paying attention, because they participated on the front end and invested their blood, sweat, and tears and efforts. But the big shots who's doing well, they living on Nob Hill, they want to whisper to council people, don't go for that, don't vote for that. But did they disclose what their personal interests in it? Did Jimmy Marvellis tell you, because Loretta blurted it out? I had never heard it at the last meeting. Loretta Walsh blurted out, they're going to get rid of 55. Well, Local 55 is the union that does residential construction. They're not the only one. And this program doesn't require you to be in a union apprenticeship, because Del Tech has some apprenticeships as well. So the people who are trying to make this a union versus non-union, they're not telling you the truth either, because we've discussed all this at committee meetings. It's a bona fide apprenticeship program, and unions aren't the only ones who have bona fide apprenticeship programs. But see, if you want to listen to the people who don't want to help your community, if you want to listen to them, you can. But this has been a 4-year conversation that's been fully vetted. And if you're against it, you're against it. If you're for it, you're for it. And that's all I have, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Councilman Guy. I am going to, I'll entertain a motion to move substitute 1 to ordinance 18-41 out of committee. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
All right, so we'll move into a voice vote. Committee members, Councilwoman Oliver?
No.
Councilwoman McCoy?
Yes.
Councilman Turner?
Yes.
President Shabazz?
No.
And myself would be yes. So does that make it tied?
I don't know, you didn't ask me.
I'm sorry, Councilwoman Gray.
It's okay, my vote's no.
So I'm going to say that was 3 yes and 3 no's.
Correct.
Is that it?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so if that's the case, it will still be held in committee because it's a tie vote. Thank you. We'll move on to our next agenda item, which is ordinance 20-7, which is to amend chapter 34 of the city code regarding inspections of rented or leased dwellings. Councilman Guy, will you be speaking to the legislation this evening?
Yes, Madam Chair. First of all, I want to announce that there's a new paragraph F that's being added. And if you have the ordinance in front of you, you can follow along because most of it comes out of a paragraph that's already in the document. But I'm going to read what the new paragraph F would be, which would be added on page 4 in section 1, paragraph F, that reads, the F, The purpose of all rental inspections shall be enforcement of the provisions of the city code concerning life safety items, which include but are not limited to smoke/carbon monoxide detectors, lead exposure, heating sources, hot water sources, electrical systems, sanitary disposal sources, water damage, roofs and means of egress and ingress, period. So that's just section 5 that's being added for the discussion today. What that does is it doesn't change the legislation, but sometimes there's value in legislation having a statement of the purpose within the text of the ordinance, so that when people have to make discretionary calls, because all executive branch employees make make discretionary calls, having some sense of a purpose allows you to go, to act in accordance with what the legislative body was trying to do. So that's what that section is for. Now, overall, this was a piece of legislation that was introduced a while ago. In fact, when I first came on council, it was on a list of things that were of interest to me. And sometime when you're working in an organization like city council, where there's an effort to take 5 and 6 issues and put them all in one piece of legislation, sometimes that works. And sometimes that doesn't work. So recently that didn't work in connection with a blight bill that tried to take on just too many issues in one piece of legislation. But nevertheless, there was a point in time where this legislation was introduced, and it was kind of held because actually there was not a belief that it was going to be needed, because I was like pretty sure the mayor had 7 votes to do what he planned on doing. At least they were acting like they had 7 votes. But during the discussion, when the blight bill was defeated, Councilman Adams made a statement that grabbed my attention. And he made a statement to the effect of like, it's absolutely necessary to have pre-rental inspections. That's the only way people can have a fair shot of having decent housing they rent, and for the renters to have, in a sense, proof that when they rented the house, it was in good condition. And in addition, he made a comment, and he said that the mayor had already agreed to do something in the neighborhood of like 1,500 inspections. So apparently they had there are certain people who had kind of like side deals going on beyond what the legislation said. So that was stated during the argument. But then he made another statement, and he said, and nobody else is doing anything. And when the meeting was over and it didn't pass, and as I was reflecting on the meeting, I thought about what he said, and it made me remember that, well, I was trying to do something. So I went and dusted off the piece of legislation that does nothing more than creates pre-rental inspection. And that's all it does. It's not trying to do anything else. It's not trying to get caught up in all of the 20 or how many items that people try to put in one bill. This is like a standalone bill. And using the same language of my colleagues, it allows the person renting to have an opportunity to go into good housing, and it allows the landlord to have a bright line as to the condition when they rented the property. So if something goes wrong and they end up in court or something, there's clear evidence of where this property was at a specific date and time. And so I said, well, let me go ahead and try to get this scheduled for a committee meeting, because I thought it was dead legislation. But that's where we are today. And I guess the genesis of the language is there's a story behind this pre-rental issue that goes back quite some years. But during the Jim Sills era, and I was on city council during part of his era, one of the council members, Ortega, I believe, kind of championed pre-rental inspections. So we had a pretty good pre-rental inspection program operating. Then when there was a change in city council, the change resulted in folks wanting to get rid of pre-rental inspection. Now, all throughout this time, since around 2006, so you can go to the lobby and look at the picture of the city council that's in existence around 2006 or somewhere in there. And so during that era, the program was pretty much shut down for the most part. So it seems to me that all of the people who were supporting the blight bill wanted pre-rental inspection, and the people who was against the blight bill wanted pre-rental inspection. And then this legislation went to the community through the subcommittee, Community Housing Subcommittee, and the vast majority of the people there at that meeting, they seemed to support the idea of pre-rental inspections, but everybody had a tweak. And a lot of them were real good tweaks. But what happens is if you put too many tweaks in, you end up back with a piece of legislation that's dealing with 8 or 20 issues, and you may as well just throw it in the garbage because you're wasting your time. So this represents a tweak that came out of that meeting where a couple of people had some ideas and thoughts on what should be added, if you will, without actually changing the legislation per se. And so those are incorporated in this section F called purpose. So I think the two people principally who I would say are the people responsible for this particular amendment would be Farrell and Wilhauer. Those were two people whose recommendations didn't get the legislation into doing a whole lot of additional things, but allowed their recommendations to not change the heart and soul of the limited nature of this particular piece of legislation. So that kind of summarizes part of the history and how we got here. And at the end of the day, I call it, it's like a audit to me. So the way the audit works is the government comes in and they establish a bright line as to the status of the property. And the renter knows what it is, and the landlord knows what it is. So they're on equal playing field once that pre-rental inspection takes place. Also, I want to remind all members of council that 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, we did something backwards. And it might sound odd to call it backwards, but we did it. What we did is, if we were going to add pre-rental inspections back then we'd need to add more staff to do the inspections. What we did is we allowed the administration to convince us to give them 4 more people in L&I to do inspections, because they said they're going to be needed once the blight bill passed and all that. They'd be needed for part of the pre-rental inspection. Well, lo and behold, they never got the legislation passed, but for 4 years, they've had the 4 people who would be assigned to do work coming out of the blight bill. So at a meeting recently, the administration tried to say, well, we don't have any people to do this. And when I reminded them that we already gave you the 4 people 3 years ago, they didn't know what to say, because that's exactly what happened. So they already have people. Then somebody else made a point, well, how are you going to do this during COVID? Well, everybody in the world has a reason why nobody can do anything because of COVID. And at the end of the day, the governor and executive officers know how to read the law. And if there's a need to, at a certain point in time, suspend certain things, they do that. The thing about a pre-rental inspection is there's actually no need for there to be a whole bunch of people around to do one. But that's not my call. The executive branch will figure out whether they need to suspend it temporarily, just as the governor has done, just as the mayor did, creating a holiday, letting everybody be off from work. There's a lot of executive authority on what to do under special circumstances. But to me, that's not a good enough reason to not put the law in place, since it seems every council person I've ever heard talk says they're for pre-rental inspections. Renters, half of the city are renters. This is a new Wilmington. Half of the people in Wilmington, they say, are renters. And usually, just like everything else, there's usually undercounts when people start counting things of that nature. And so one thing we know, there's a lot of renters, and without a pre-rental inspection, they don't have any protection. And there's a lot of landlords who see the value in a pre-rental inspection, but they also see some value if they can not have to do it. Some of them do. And some of them wholeheartedly see the value without any reservation. So I think that summarizes all that I needed to say initially about this piece of legislation. And I just was trying to get a copy of it to see. Madam Chair, do you have a copy that lists any of the co-sponsors?
Let me check. Hold on 1 second. It is on you and Councilman Turner.
Okay, so we co-sponsored this because we had discussed it a long, long time ago. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Guy. Councilwoman Gray.
Thank you. I totally support pre-rental inspections. As I stated last time we discussed this, the magistrate court of which I was a judge totally handles landlord-tenant cases. So I had a lot of landlord-tenant cases. And most of the cases that came before me were problems that existed in the apartments prior to the tenants moving in, and they just got worse. They needed someplace to live, so they moved in with the promise that the problem would be corrected or something would be done, and that didn't happen. Of course, that wasn't the total of the landlord-tenant cases, but that was a large amount of them. I do understand there's a problem with staffing, so maybe we need to increase the staff of L&I. I totally support that. I think they need more staff anyway, inspectors to go out, because majority of the problems are inspecting properties that have problems in the city. And now we want to do pre-rental inspections. So I totally support this, and anything that needs to be worked out can be worked out if the legislation passes, including hiring more staff for L&I. I mean, you can't solve a problem if you don't have the people. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gray. Is there any other questions from council members? Council President?
Just thank you, Madam Chair. I think the whole concept behind pre-rental inspection is exactly where we want to go. So to do all the things that Councilman Guy said would be beneficial to our community. But also, we also have a fiscal responsibility of we can make laws that sound good, but the practicality of it being implemented and what it would cost and how, based on the numerous amount of rental properties we have, has it been calculated in order for us to do pre-rental inspections once a year of every property? It won't be once a year because you don't know how many the properties will turn over. What that kind of manpower and man hours and costs it would cost us to do that based on the exorbitant amount of rental properties we have. Have we considered also the possible delay? Some apartments flip over in 1 or 2 months, or the landlord needs to turn it over in a month. Will he be able to get that inspection done in that month so that he can rent that property for that family that needs to be housed? Has all of that type of analytical calculation been done based on the numerous volume of rental properties that we have? Any kind of data on the turnover time, that is historically, so that we could see if this is a good thing for our community, for the city, but can it actually be implemented with the resources that we have? Yes, we added 4. Was 4 enough? Is it all those kinds of questions is to talk about the feasibility of it. Has that research been done? And is that included in the fiscal impact and the social and environmental impact of this piece of legislation? Do we have all of that information there?
Councilman Guy, did you want to answer to any of that or move to the next question? Next hand.
And Commissioner Starkey said he would like to speak. He's in the.
Yeah, I told him. Yeah, I know.
Okay.
Thank you, Council President.
Yeah, the 4 people that we already gave them, according to the time that they said it, was what they needed in connection with inspections, in connection with the blight bill. So they've already received what they said they needed previously. They got them ahead of time. So they always, every executive branch agency in America knows how to say we don't have enough people. The police department knew how to say, oh, well, we need 5 employees to do the camera program. In reality, all they had to do was reassign 5 people and they could have went on and started the program and then determine if they needed more after that. So everybody says that. They always say we don't have enough staff. So at some point in time, when you've already given 4 people, then they can get back to us as we're now preparing the next budget cycle. And if they see there's a need, if they find out there's a need for more, then they would report back to us and say, we're going to need some more help in this. But they already have 4 people available. Now, if they've done some study and research, they're welcome to present it. But at the end of the day, every executive department in America knows how to say we need more people. And especially if they don't want to do it, then they make sure they say we don't have enough money. We don't have enough resources. As opposed to saying, well, here's what we can do. And we're going to get these people reassigned to it. And here's how we would do it. And here's what we may be requesting of you in the next budget cycle. If they was totally for it, they'd be the exact people who would tell you what to do to meet their needs in the next budget cycle. So that's my answer to that question.
Madam Chair, may I follow up?
Yes.
Thank you. And I appreciate your point, Councilman Guy. But having the facts and the data gives us the ability to make those decisions ourselves. And so without having that and your assumption of how they feel, I can't calculate that into the feasibility of this legislation. I need data, I need facts. And that's what, to me, being fiscally responsible, we'll know whether or not we're doing legislation that can be accomplished. We can afford it at this current time. Maybe we need to wean our way into it, but to just make it law and it'll be effective immediately, it would be, building a building without a strong enough foundation by which to carry it. And then we have to worry about the outcome and the misrepresentation at a later time. So that's what I was asking, was there environmental study? Was it any analyticals added to based on the number of properties that we have? What's the number of inspectors, the hours, the turnaround time, all of that to be taken into consideration? And if your answer, I guess from what you're saying, is that answer would be no, that research was not done. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the two council members and I'll come to Commissioner Starkey. Councilwoman Gray and then Councilwoman Oliver.
I was just going to point out there are a lot of problems possibly with this legislation, but I think if it's passed, that's the time for license and inspections to try to work the details out. When you get to the public, we'll probably hear that landlords had to wait months to get inspections, which is another complaint we may hear. Also, like there's not enough staff. What will the remedies be? I mean, there is a lot of work that needs to be done with this legislation, but I don't think it will get done unless it's passed. So that's the reason I'm supporting it. And then the administration will have to find a way to make it work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gray. Councilwoman Oliver.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to say, I just wanted to hear what Jeff Starkey had to say. I'm sorry. Thank
Okay, no problem. Commissioner Starkey.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the opportunity to speak. And I kind of spoke to some of the issues during our subcommittee meeting on the issues that this legislation presents to our office. Capacity-wise, I don't think you realize the amount of inspections that this will require, because not only is it pre-rental, it's re-issuance of leases as well. So that capacity, we're running somewhere around 18,000 units right now, rental units, and that's just a rough number off the top of my head. And that's a lot of inspections. If you're only averaging probably about 10 to 14 inspections a day by inspectors. So the capacity, first of all, is problematic for us. You just don't have the capacity in order to keep up with the demand. And that was one of the issues, we talked about it once before, is that, and the reason why pre-rentals were eliminated back in 2007 or 6 wasn't just because, we wanted to eliminate them. One, we brought on instant ticketing program, which is one of the major issues that inspectors deal with on a regular basis. And most council people submit their information to us or their complaints to us regarding sanitation issues that are out there. So we created the instant ticketing program. And at that time, we couldn't keep up with the volume of instant tickets and pre-rental inspections, which caused a major problem for landlords in terms of being able to meet their demands. I mentioned in the subcommittee meeting last time, we had landlords waiting a month to 2 months to get their inspections because they couldn't rent it until they had their pre-rental inspections. That's problematic from a business standpoint. And we were holding up their livelihood. So that was one of the reasons. But again, the capacity, just, we don't have the capacity to be able to keep up with the demand at this point. Theory-wise, it makes sense. Reality, it just won't work, in my opinion. You're going to need an army in order to keep up with that amount of rental inspections. This legislation says you got to do it for rentals, you got to do it for reissuing of leases, and it says any violation can stop someone from renting that property. That's problematic as well. So again, I would just want to express my concerns that capacity-wise, we don't have the capacity to do this.
Thank you, Commissioner Starkey.
I do.
Councilman Oliver.
Yeah. Now, thank you. Now, what I find interesting, I would think I would see a lot of landlords on here for this, but they're not on here tonight. Because this would.
We haven't gone to the public yet, so that's the reason why.
Okay, thanks.
They're in there.
Okay.
May I add one last thing?
Yes, Commissioner.
One of the things that we found out when we did it last time, we were dealing with landlords that were responsible. And we wasn't getting to the folks who would be underground landlords or with underground landlords who were renting properties to people illegally. So, and we need to devise a program to be able to go after those kind of folks as well. I mean, that was the important part of it. So, yeah, we were dealing with landlords that were doing it on a regular basis who were responsible. But, again, we need to go after the folks with the problems that are occurring in some of these units.
Okay. Yep, thank you, Commissioner Starkey. Councilman Guy, did you want it before I go to the public?
Yes. Again, the statement that the commissioner just made, okay, because he may have been in the government back in 06 or 07, whenever that was. And what he just told you was that somebody set a priority and made something else more important than doing pre-rental inspections. So there's always competing interests. So at that time, not doing pre-rental inspections was allowed to carry the day. And that's part of the reason from 06 to here in 2020, why we've had such a reduction in the quality of property, because all of that time, renters were just at the mercy of, if they got a good landlord, they were okay. And if they got a bad one, then they had a problem. And so somebody made a decision, a group of policymakers made a decision and said, heck with the pre-rental inspections. We're going to go do this other thing that somebody else wants done as a priority. And so we see where we are right now. And I don't believe that, I've never met a person yet, and I'm not saying I'm not going to meet them tonight, but I don't recall ever meeting a person who just flat out said they was against pre-rental inspection program. So there's always something going to be in the balance, competing interests. So we had a city halfway made up of renters and landlords. If this was important in 06, 07, it's of major importance now in 2020. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Guy. Commissioner Starkey, before I go back to Councilman Oliver.
Yes, I just like to add, even though we got rid of pre-rental inspections, we implemented the rental inspection program. So that was in place and we're still conducting those as well. What I want to also emphasize is that it doesn't negate someone who lives in a substandard housing to make a complaint, which we will follow up on. So we get an opportunity to go in there when we deal with complaints, and we get those all the time. And we get tenant complaints all the time. So that's a way for us to get into the units as well. It's just coordinating the pre-rentals back then was difficult, managing both programs. But again, we're doing rental inspections where we coordinated a lot better in terms of sending out notices randomly to people in those neighborhoods, and we're dealing with those rental inspections, and that's what we're doing now. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, Commissioner. Councilwoman Oliver.
Sure. Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to ask the sponsor, because I think I missed it when when got me some water. What's the, I heard it said something about to change the language. I don't have that additional part in front of me. What's the difference in this ordinance and Adams ordinance?
Well, yeah. Adams didn't have an ordinance. Adams was commenting on the blight bill, and he was discussing the blight bill, and he was saying pre-rental instructions was important, and pre-rental inspections are important, and that the mayor agreed to have 1,500 inspections done. Apparently, they had a side deal.
Okay, gotcha.
So if you had a side deal on that, then we already know he's committed to 1,500 to Councilman Adams.
Okay, so let me follow. So, and yours is saying what?
Mine is just, I'm not trying to do a whole blight bill. This is just a straight pre-rental inspection. Everybody on council at some point in time has been upset about how one of their constituents got treated, and has said, because I had been keeping a checklist of who was saying they were for pre-rental inspection, and at some point in time, almost everybody said it. At some point in time. If we didn't agree on anything else during the last 4 years, when it came to addressing housing quality for rental people, it was the pre-rental inspection.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I think also to what was just stated, I believe in the blight bill, it has it as rental inspections for 1,500 properties at least. And Councilman Guys is specifically for pre-rental inspections. So that's one of the main differences. So I just wanted to point that out. Is there any comments from the public? All right, I'll come back to you, Councilman Guy. Eli, your hand is up first. Eli, if you can unmute.
Hi, sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I was just wondering about Section 8 units that are subsidized by WHA. They are inspected by McCormick every year. So would they also be further subject to an inspection by the city? And I'm wondering if there are any guidelines that have been talked about for the inspection.
Thank you for that question. We'll come back to you with an answer to that.
Okay.
Next hand raised is Jeffrey Sheraton.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep. I guess, so I just wanted to start out by saying first that the blight bill did not call for pre-rental inspections. The blight bill called for rental inspections that were to be done, I believe, every 3 to 4 years. So comparing the workload that Ellen and I would face with 18,000 pre-rental inspections a year to the every 3 to 4 year inspections is, in my opinion, foolish. It's just poor math. Claiming that 4 inspectors are enough to cover 18,000 pre-rental inspections is insane. I mean, if we do yearly leases for 18,000 houses, that's like 12 inspections per day if the inspectors work every single day of the year. So that simply doesn't make sense. As far as the other points in legislation, I brought this stuff up at the Healthy Subcommittee's meeting, and I'm kind of a little disappointed it wasn't even addressed. But it is extremely alarming that there's no timeline in this legislation for the city to complete an inspection. I mean, if I'm looking at renting out $1,000 house and the city comes to me and says, we need to delay you renting this house for a month every time you rent it, and I re-rent the property every year, I mean, I'm looking at like an $80 per month increase just to cover that extra vacancy. I don't know when we're talking to tenants about whether they're in favor of pre-rental inspections or not that this gets brought up, but I think it's important for those tenants to understand that it's not like these pre-rental inspections are free and the landlords have costs of labor to get them done. I think there's also some issues in the ordinance where there's no clear language stating when re-inspections would actually be required. I know it's very clear that they would be required at every lease renewal, which for many properties would be every year, which I just can't imagine Ellen and I having the capacity to do that. There are also some other tenants that could be month to month that I'm not sure if the legislation is calling for monthly inspections, but that would be equally crazy. As the previous speaker brought up, the ordinance also calls for duplicate inspections for properties that are already inspected by Section 8 and SRAB. It's also alarming that, if we're going to have all of these properties get inspected, well, there's no mechanism for the city to report to potential tenants that the property was inspected. There's no public facing website. There's nothing. So the people that are renting properties have no idea if these properties were inspected unless they're reaching out to LNI calling, which is just not practical. The ordinance also doesn't establish any means for a landlord to easily schedule an inspection, like some sort of an online portal. So now LNI is going to be overwhelmed with 18,000 calls a year from landlords trying to get their inspections done. I think it's also alarming that we previously had these pre-rental inspections, and in the Healthy Communities Subcommittee, I brought up the fact that it didn't seem like rental properties were that much better when we were doing the inspections. No one disputed that fact. I'd love to see if anyone has evidence that these actually work. I'd love to hear it. To speak to Councilwoman Gray's point about the landlords she's seeing in court when she was a judge, these aren't the landlords that are licensed that are going to go get these inspections. These landlords that have the leaking roofs when people move in or the plumbing that doesn't work don't participate in licensing or the inspection process. So you're still going to have these people as long as tenants are willing to rent from them. If you want to truly attack bad landlords, we really need to make the city a better place for good landlords. We should encourage landlords to go get licensed. We should remove barriers that landlords face when they're trying to supply affordable housing. As long as we have all of these barriers in place that prevent landlords from supplying housing, we're going to have this issue no matter how many inspections we do. Thank you. Oh, and I'm sorry, one other brief point. I think we need to dispel the myth that tenants are at the mercy of their landlords. Tenants have countless protections already in the landlord-tenant code. So if you're a tenant listening to this and you're in substandard housing, step up. Send a letter to your landlord, follow the code, and get it fixed. Don't just sit there and be a victim. You have the keys to resolve these issues. That's it.
Thank you, Jeff. Next is Don.
Unmute. Okay. Before this escapes me, I want to say to Jeff's point, yes, tenants do have access to the landlord-tenant code, and they do have a lot of protections. However, the majority of tenants do not exercise those protections. Less than 5% of folks that find themselves in trouble with their landlord seek out help from many other legal agencies. So even though those protections are out there, they don't know how to step up. Okay, but be that as it may, I'd like to say that we spent the first hour of this talking about our most precious commodity, the children. Okay, now it's absolutely essential, as Mr. Adams said, that we have this. Now, when you're talking about pre-rental inspections, you got to think about the children too. Think about those kids that are living in these properties, okay? Now, I know that this mayor, when he first got in his first term, one of his main focuses was going to be to improve housing. He tried to do it with the blight bill, but the blight bill was just a little bit too expansive. So that didn't work. However, this pre-rental inspection legislation, this is a good start. This is an excellent start. Now, folks on the provider end, they're probably going to complain about, well, this is going to provide an economic hardship for me, and, it's a burden. But I disagree. I mean, if you look at this legislation, a $25 fine for a violation. So if you've got a property ready to go, and if you can't put your tenant in there because you're waiting for an inspection, well, if it's ready, if it's truly ready, that's the cost of doing business. If you get fined $25, at least it's not $2,500. Which I might add that if these were higher fines, then maybe we could generate some income to try to get some more inspectors. Now, I always ask the folks on the provider end, if you had to live in one of the properties that we're talking about right now, or if you had to put one of your family members or one of your children in that property, would you? I think not. Now, I know that we're talking about costs and how much it's going to be, but listen, we can study a problem to death. We can get more data and more data until we're like drowning in data. Okay? Now, I think that many of the council folks that are on this committee live in neighborhoods that have the kind of housing that we're talking about right now. And I know that maybe some of your constituents come to you and complain about it. But you know what? You've got to be for this, because if you're not for it, then you're giving those irresponsible landlords a green light to keep doing what they're doing. And now, true that most of the folks that are on a call like this are the responsible landlords, and true, we have to somehow get those landlords that aren't responsible. But the only way that we can begin to get those landlords that aren't responsible is if we have some legislation. We can find every problem with this legislation. But you know what? We got to start somewhere. We have to start somewhere. And once it's passed, we can figure it out. And as far as letting folks know about problem properties, if a property has been inspected, if it's an issue, hey, we got a city website. Okay, we can put that information on the website. Now, in closing, I have a question for Commissioner Starkey. Now, the homes that are substandard, that the tenants get L&I involved in, and if the tenant has to be evicted, or if they have to be put out because it's not habitable or whatever, does L&I flag that property and make that landlord address the issues and address the safety and compliance issues before he can rent it out again? That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. We'll come back to you with the answer to your question. Next up, we have Cliff.
Yes. Hi, my name is Cliff Werline. I'm a landlord and provide rental property mostly for low-income people in the city. And I'm very alarmed about this whole pre-rental inspection legislation, mainly in that there's no mechanism or time limit for the city to do the pre-rental inspection. So as a landlord, I could have my property all ready for a rental, and I could be waiting a month or 2 months or possibly even longer, losing $1,000 a month waiting for an inspection. What I don't understand about this is that the city is already doing rental inspections. And beyond that, a tenant can make a phone call anytime they want and get an immediate inspection. I'll just give you an example. I have a tenant at one of my properties that hasn't paid the rent for 9 months. And we were headed to court. And so to muddy up the water, she picked up the phone and called L&I and said there's a problem in the house. L&I inspector was there immediately. And so a tenant can make a phone call anytime they want. And this talk about, what about the children in the house? It's just, that's a complete red herring. Because the tenants, first of all, my tenants, they'll pick up the phone and call me. They'll say, hey, Cliff, I've got a leak under my kitchen sink. That just happened this morning. I made an appointment with my plumber. I went down there today. I saw the leak. I showed it to my plumber and he fixed it. And that's what happens with every issue.
The tenants call the landlord. The landlord goes and gets it fixed. And there are market forces that are in play here. If a landlord doesn't keep his unit up, the tenant's going to move out and find a better place. The other comment that I would make here is that there's probably, I don't know how many, maybe 10,000 or more unregistered units in the city. And the city's over half rental property, and you can just do the math. And so, you know, by doing rental inspections on the landlords that have stepped up, like myself and the others that are on this call, and we have registered our properties. So then, as the good landlords, we become subject to these onerous laws that end up costing us a lot of money. You know, Sam Guy said that he doesn't know of any landlords that are against pre-rental inspections, and I kind of wonder what planet he's living on, because I'm in a landlord association. I'm in 2 landlord associations, and I don't know any landlord who is for rental inspections. There just are too many problems with it, and I appreciate everything that Jeff Starkey said very much about the fact that there simply is no capacity in the city to inspect 18,000 rental units every year. The city just does not have the capacity to do it. And so I just want to go on record as saying that I don't understand this. I think that the city gains absolutely nothing by doing this. And as a landlord, there are so many barriers to renting in the city and costs like this that the city imposes that it really, it gives me pause. I know a landlord who's actually dumping all his property because it's just too much. He's selling everything. And I don't want to have to do that, but I've thought about it. And so I would just ask the commissioners and everybody else considering this to please reconsider the impact that this is going to have, not only on the landlords, but on the tenants who really could end up finding it more difficult to find rental property in the city. So thank you for listening, and those are my comments. That's my input for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Cliff. Next is Lillian. And if you can unmute Lillian. All right, we'll come back to Lillian. Lillian, yep, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lillian Nichols, First District, and I am a landlord in the city. And I would just like to say, to address a couple of issues. I've heard a couple of folks say, particularly Jeff and Councilwoman Gray, say this legislation should be passed and we can figure it out later. I don't think that is good responsibility there for council to pass legislation that we know has issues and that needs to be worked out before it goes to the mayor for signature, because we've talked about the hardship that tenants face as a landlord if this legislation is passed, and some of these issues that have been brought up tonight is not worked out. Then me as a landlord, and as it being my primary sole source of income and as a small business owner, then that becomes a hardship for me. Don had asked a question, what happens to properties when if L&I finds issues and problems and the landlord's not dealing with them. I can say, having dealt with many L&I inspectors, is that it doesn't take L&I long to pull your certificate of occupancy, making it impossible for you to rent if you're not keeping up with code. I think the process that we're going through now, where the city is inspecting our units once every 2 years, I think that is sufficient. And I think it allows the city to continue in that vein. This legislation, though it is a feel-good piece of legislation, I think it is onerous on license inspection to try and do pre-rental inspections, normal inspections, renewal inspections. It's just too much for them. And in the long run, it's going to cost the city more money, not in just the sense of right now in time and effort, but these are full-time employees that the city will eventually have to pay, retire, and replace. And we're already talking about the city not necessarily having the funds in their coffers to do that. So I, as a resident of the city, a small business owner in the city, in the 1st District, I urge my council person to vote against this legislation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Lillian, for your comments. Next up, we have Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm also a landlord within the city. Proudly went to Bancroft and Pulaski Elementary. And I just got to say that there's a lot of points raised about, not having the details ironed out before this becomes legislation is a big problem for me. You work it out later. There's been many points raised that some of those things will become problematic. I can completely see that happening. And for me, I actually support pre-rental inspections. I mean, fundamentally, that is a good thing. You got to have a benchmark. You got to understand and know where things stand. But that doesn't tackle the real problem in this city. And that is those 10,000 unregistered units. That's your problem. This doesn't get at it. This weighs on the city harder than anything, especially from an L&I perspective, and really doesn't help out those people with the biggest problems. I like what I do as a landlord. My goal is to come in and improve the areas I'm in. I tend to engage with the homeowners around me to make sure that what has been a stigma related to rentals isn't something that continues within the areas I invest. And the notion that it's a cost of doing business to lose $1,000 a month is mind-boggling to me, because that's far exceeds the grocery budget for me. So I'd just like to say that I think that this is a little short-sighted in terms of connecting the details with the actual fundamental successes that could occur. I think the city could do a better job getting the details ironed out beforehand. That's all I got.
Thank you, Chris, for your comments. And then the last comment I see is CCPM.
Hi, everyone. My name is actually Chris. I have just wanted to say kudos to Jeff Starkey and his team for doing the job they already do with the staff they have and the funding they have. I know they're not perfect. No one is, and no one would say they do absolutely fantastic. There's always a place to improve, but I just want to give them a quick kudos, because their staff has always consistently done for us, and I'm sure other landlords, the best they can underneath the circumstances. It does cause me quite a bit of consternation to hear Councilman Guy and candidate Don Farrell speak about some of the comments and the questions they have. I'm sure that, gentlemen, you may have not come from a business background, but it is certainly alarming and detrimental to any business to have government constraints set a benchmark for how much profit or how many dollars you cannot recover, especially in this year when a lot of our tenants, 40 or 50% of our tenants in some cases, have not either had the ability to pay rent or simply misunderstood the current legislation or the current environment. and thought that maybe just because someone saw a cancel rent sign that they could not pay rent and get away with it too, or they don't understand where that comes from. So set a bright line or a benchmark in the sand and say, you're allowed not to pay rent for this time. Yeah, it'll be added onto the back. But in the meantime, how do we as landlords continue to support the businessmen that we need to hire, the tradespeople we need to invest in, the Home Depot materials we need to purchase, when there's no dollars flowing into this economy? We become squeezed on both ends. Yes, the bank still wants their mortgage money. City council still wants their $25 inspection fee. Home Depot still wants their money, but yet we can't raise any rent dollars. And then to Councilwoman Gray's point, we're the same folks that you see in court when we're trying to get those professional tenants, those bad folks, out of our properties to make them more profitable, to move those folks who constantly tear up our properties, to move those folks out of our unit to then get a quality tenant or a better tenant. Because I think, as Cliff said, market forces definitely come into play, and we're fairly well regulated by the market. Very little would come into play by what council could do. It only seems to put a stranglehold on willing participants and honest folks when council wants to enact these kinds of inane legislation that flies in the face of convention. When there's no method to request a schedule or inspection, there's no method by which the city would complete an inspection on a timeline or be sanctioned by not setting a time frame. There's no fine or fee. Like, do I get my $25 inspection fee waived if you can't complete that within 30 days? Do you give me an annual exemption if you can't do it within 6 weeks? Who pays me back for the $1,000 in missed rent because I was forced to sit out? Or I had a tenant and my tenant has now left me because even though they were approved, I had to wait and they found some other place to live. So many concerns on here, many alarms being raised, and it saddens me to think that I hear those things coming out of council's mouth or Don Farrell's mouth, that it's just the cost of doing business. I wholeheartedly disagree and would implore council to rethink these things before they go headlong into legislation without all the parts and pieces in place. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, now it seems like we got a lot more. Christian is up next.
Good evening, council. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I wanted to say that pre-rental inspections are something that would play a role in improving the quality of rental housing. And it's a priority for council members and for residents of the city of Wilmington to make sure that residents have quality housing to live in. And like Councilman Gray said, a lot of people move into units with the understanding that the landlord will fix things, and they never get fixed. And doing a pre-rental inspection would be a way to address that issue. And I think all of us have, many of us have cars, and every 2 years we get our car inspected. And in anticipation of that inspection, we do maintenance, kind of preventative maintenance, knowing, okay, this is going to have to pass inspection. Before I get it inspected, I'm going to have to take care of everything. Knowing that there's a pre-rental inspection is a way to make sure that that delayed maintenance that property owners might consider, that they make a decision, oh, I'm not going to do that because I'm going to have to face an inspector. And we do L&I does do a certain number of inspections every year, orienting those inspections around the moment of pre-rental makes a lot of sense. I totally understand some of the operational issues that people who are landlords have brought up, and those would have to be addressed. We can't create a system where landlords have to wait 2 months to get an inspection and that they're responsible for any costs imposed by that. But I think that it is possible to address that as part of the operational rollout of the legislation. And I think that as a commitment to the proportion, the 55% of people in the city of Wilmington who rent, we should make a commitment to them and make sure that when they move into a unit, it meets standards for health and safety, and that they can have confidence when they move into that unit that the city of Wilmington has taken their health and safety seriously and has put resources towards evaluating that unit before they move in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christian, for your comment. Next up is Frank.
Hello, my name is Frank Brevoort. I'm a responsible landlord in the city of Wilmington and have been for many years. When you talk about pre-rental inspections, you're assuming that the landlord that's involved is registered and licensed in the city of Wilmington and subject to inspections. I served 3 years on the rental property committee of the real estate and housing department, along with Bud Friel. And I don't know if Bud Friel's still on, but he can verify this. We had a project at that time that took a look at the hilltop section of the city. Bud made arrangements for a company to go and identify all the rental properties. The person doing the surveying looked at how many meters were on a building. If there were 2 or more meters, it was a rental property. He would knock on the door. Are you a tenant or a homeowner? And if it was a tenant, he'd get the landlord's name and contact information. They looked at computer records, and if the owner of the property was not at the address of the property, then they assumed that he was a remote landlord. It coughed up so many landlords that were non-licensed, uneducated, not compliant, that it simply overwhelmed license and inspections. We even offered a 4-week training program for these people to try to teach them about the electrical testers, to go through each of the outlets, what was required for paint, what was required for all the things to be able to pass an inspection. But the whole point of this is the biggest problem that in the city of Wilmington is not with responsible landlords who are licensed, because if someone complains about us, we get called right away. And most of the inspectors know that my wife and I respond quickly to anything that they request. And most of the times, they're not even valid complaints. There's someone trying to get out of being evicted or something else. However, on the other hand, the quantity of landlords, maybe these people inherited a house from a family member and they said, do we sell it or do we rent it? And they just go rent it. They don't know what they're doing. And it's up to us, the city and the responsible landlords, to bring them along, get them licensed. By my calculations, the city could bring in an extra $500,000 if all they did were to register and license every landlord that's in the city that's not licensed now. So it's a pretty big nut to go after. And I would hate to see that we reinstitute a plan that used to be in force when I first started being a landlord. It failed before. And I think just under its own weight, if we were to reinstitute it, would fail again. I think Jeff is spot on, target on. I also was on 2.5 years on a committee for the Newcastle County Rental Code Committee. They considered pre-rental inspections and dismissed it as being just too horrendous. They adopted a random inspection where they would send out notices to tenants and say, we're going to come by and randomly inspect your unit. They did that for a few years. They found so little to go after, they dropped it in favor of doing the complaint-based system. There simply was not, with responsible landlords who are licensed, there simply is not that big of a problem. The biggest problem is with all these people who are not licensed and not registered and not owning up to what is needed to pass a code. So we've talked before in another committee meeting, there is a way to do things for responsible landlords and tenants Jeff Starkey has, and we've talked about it, Jeff, and you actually showed me a pamphlet, a checklist. Needs a little updating, but with a little updating, it would be perfect. And this is simply a checklist that the landlord could go over along with the tenant when the tenant occupies the building. The landlord signs it, the tenant signs it, it's submitted to license and inspections. License and inspection could choose to actually do an inspection to follow up as a quality control, or if they know they have a problem landlord who may not be doing everything that he should be doing, they can kind of concentrate on his and make sure that the tenant calls that you call the tenant, did you sign this? Yes. Did you go over everything with your landlord? Well, yes. Do you have any complaints? Did the landlord promise anything? And if they want, they can come out and actually do a follow-up inspection. So with the threat of being randomly chosen or follow-up inspected, responsible landlords would do the right thing to begin with. It's those landlords who are not registered, not responsible, those are the ones that you want to go after. And the first step is to get them registered. We in the Greater Wilmington Housing Providers have even written a tenants' rights and responsibility guide. Now this covers a lot of topics. And one of the first things that it discusses is if you have a problem with your property, call your landlord first. And if he doesn't respond within this reasonable length of time, call license inspections. And here's the number. And this in the Newcastle County, this is required. We have one for Newcastle County. That was part of the rental code committee that I was on. It was written and we distribute it to every single person we rent to in the county. This guide for the city, Tenants' Rights and Responsibility Guide, has been customized for the city of Wilmington and would give not only a landlord-tenant code to every tenant, but when given this guide to the tenant, they are properly informed about what they need to do if they have a problem. Now, it just seems to me that we could be, what would you say, forward thinking and do something like this rather than go back to something that failed in the past. And why did it fail? It got overwhelmed. It became 1 month, the second month before we could even get an inspection. Many of my properties, and I've gone on a lot of tenants that I do a lot of background checking on, many of my properties are well kept to begin with. And when the tenant moves out, there is really only a day of cleanup, touch up, make sure that anything that needs repair is done, and a new tenant can move in. So we're talking about the end of 1 month, the beginning of the next month, it is rented and occupied. As soon as you put a pre-rental inspection in place, that delays it a month because we can't rent properties easily in the middle of a month. So if we are ready on the 1st, but we don't get an inspection until the 21st, then that person who was counting on it can't move into the 1st of the month after. So we're going to lose a month's rent. And that person says, well, how am I going to be sure that you're going to pass your inspection? Don't you think maybe I should be looking for a place that was inspected first? So there's a really good chance my property will not be occupied in 1 month, but 2 months. Now, we're not only talking about me losing $1,000 a month for the vacancy, we're talking about the city of Wilmington losing earned income taxes because that place is not occupied. I'm not earning money. I'm not paying taxes on it. You know, it just seems like for us to go back to an antiquated, outdated pre-rental inspection when you don't even have the support of the Commissioner of License and Inspection. Even Bud Friel spoke out against it at the last committee meeting. That's just, you know, that's kind of like doing something again when it didn't work and expecting a different outcome. We need to be much more forward thinking and come up with something like a checklist with follow-up inspections the license and inspection can target those people, those landlords who are not doing it right, and concentrate on following up on every one of their inspection or their new tenants to make sure that they do comply until they comply. I remember when I first started working on a property, I got visited by LT Blackshear. He says, "Do you have a permit?" And I said, "What's that?" And LT Blackshear said, "Well, I tell you what, you need to go down to license inspection, get a permit. I'm going to help you through this and learn what you need to do. And I'm going to come back and inspect." And that's how we first started our first property. Most of these people who are not licensed are like that. They're just unknowledgeable. They may be innocent in getting this property. They may have inherited it. They may probably don't even know what it is that they're doing. Those are the people that you need to work on identifying, getting them coughed up, getting them licensed, bringing additional money into the city, and then getting license inspection and people like responsible landlords to bring them up to what they need to do to pass code. So, in summary, I am not in favor of doing something that was failed before. I would much rather see something that's much more proactive, much more with it in the future. And that would be identifying these landlords who are not licensed, not acting responsibly. I'm in favor of a checklist that landlords and tenants would both sign and then submit to L&I, and L&I have them randomly select or choose a particular landlord or particular property to inspect as a quality control. And I am in favor of requiring landlords to hand out the tenant's rights and responsibility guide to every tenant upon renting the apartment, just like they must do when we pass out the landlord-tenant code. That is my position. I am hoping that you agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank, for your comments. Next is Brian O'Neill.
Yeah, that's kind of a hard act to follow. Yeah, what we have here tonight is a number of responsible landlords that are in on this phone call, and we're probably pretty much all going to say the same thing, with the exception of Don. The biggest thing right now that we have, I think what I'm hearing from all fellow landlords is we're kind of getting the cart before the horse. And that cart is, there's half of the rental properties are owned by unregistered landlords. Instead of focusing right now on a program that has failed in the past, that's not really gaining the traction from what we hear, why not one of the people on this committee propose a plan to go and educate the unregistered landlords and get them registered, because you know that they can still be inspected. I think Commissioner Starkey's already said that he gets a call, he can go out and inspect the property on a complaint. And I would bet, and I'd like if the commissioner can chime in, of what % of calls that he gets from tenants are from unregistered or non-registered landlords versus those that are already registered and pretty well up to code. So my recommendation to the committee tonight would be, let's table this, and I hope that you would, and propose something. I think even the landlords that are on this call want to see the non-registered landlords become registered. That will improve the housing stock overall. So thank you.
Thank you, Brian, for your comments. And this will, Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for my second opportunity. I just wanted to, after hearing everyone's opinions on this, I wanted to just, if we could, just moving forward with what Mr. O'Neill was saying, table it and think about something more substantial that could actually add benefit to the city. And I would like to think that if you could reach out and maybe tap into those resources like us, the good, let's call it quote unquote, good landlords of the city, we're willing to help. We know the right things to do. get them involved with us. Bring us together. We can move them along, move that needle, get them through the, ignorance factor. Let's say, like, they could have inherited a property. They might not know what's going on. They're not intentionally being bad landlords, let's say. And those that are, you can weed them out. But it could also be some civil or industrial engineer from Dell Tech that could do a summer project to go through all the numbers and figure out who are these unregistered people to help you fill the gap in who is unregistered and how can we tackle the problem. And then I'm just saying, and I'm putting myself out there, let's say. I wouldn't put my fellow brethren of good landlords out there like this, but I'd get involved. I'd help them out. I'd help them bring them up to speed, because that's how I got to be a good landlord, by relying on those other good landlords in the city. And I think they would continue to reach out in the way they have to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. All right. Sorry, I'm going to go back to council member. I didn't realize I was still on mute. I'm going to go back to council members. Councilwoman Gray. I see she stepped out, so I'm going to go. I'll come back to her. Councilman Turner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very interesting to hear the landlords, also to hear my colleagues, and also to hear Commissioner Starkey. One thing for sure, I think my colleagues, even if we don't agree on this legislation right now, we will agree that this may be the first piece of legislation that we had on the table where the landlords and the commissioner are all on the same side. I think we all would agree that's an interesting piece, that we have the landlords and the commissioner on the same side. Councilwoman Gray, I definitely agree with you in saying that we need to go ahead and push legislation like this now that we have everyone's attention and everyone willing to support. It sounds like everybody wants support with education. Sound like they want to support with people knowing about their rights from a tenant perspective and from a renter's perspective. I think you guys, my colleagues, I think we finally found some legislation that will now bring both parties to the table. So now we can begin the discussion on how we move our city forward, even with blight, even with vacant, even with abandoned properties. So I thank my Councilman Guy for pushing this legislation and constantly pushing it as well. I think we're spot on now that we have legislation that can start the discussion on what's needed to be done. So thank you, Council Chair, for allowing me to say that part. And thank you for being patient to allow us to hear all the members of the community that wanted to speak on support or non-support of this topic.
Thank you, Councilman Turner, for your comments. Appreciate it. Councilwoman Gray, I'm going to come back to you, and then Councilman Guy, and then I'll give the commissioner an opportunity to respond.
Thank you. Once legislation is passed, it doesn't usually go into effect immediately. It can't be implemented immediately until rules and regs and procedures are made. So when I said that you can work on the details later after it's passed, that's what I meant. The department would have to incorporate this legislation into their daily work and into their policies and procedures. So this is what I'm discussing, where we could work together and get this started. I think it is very important that we have pre-rental inspections. It's essential, I think, to bringing up the quality of the housing in the city. As a probation officer, I used to go to different houses and I was appalled at the conditions. And I understand that these aren't the good landlords, but unless we do something like this, we won't get to the bad landlords. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Gray. Councilman Guy.
Yes, Madam Chair. A couple of things have come up. One, what I find to be very interesting is I just want to take the blight bill conversation. I don't think the blight bill incorporated any of the things that are being discussed today. I don't think it incorporated them, and some of them may have been discussed, but some of them weren't. And so the reason why I say that is because there were a lot of comments that were made today that I understand the rationale for them. But the whole purpose of this bill is to deal with one topic. It's not designed to solve every problem that was identified by folks who spoke tonight. Some people spoke about unregistered, people that have not registered. Some people talked about folks that do not have a license. This legislation has to do with folks that are going to rent a property need to have a pre-rental inspection. Now, just because a pre-rental inspection is required doesn't have anything to do with how the city deals with people are registered or not registered, or how people are licensed or not licensed. There's a different set of rules and regulations and laws on the books to address each one of those two issues. And if folks are saying that those laws aren't addressing those issues, then the question becomes, why haven't people come together with a legislative solution to the problem of lack of registration and lack of license? What I have done and am attempting to do is not to allow all of these, there's 100 other issues related to housing and licensing and inspection. The code book is so thick, it's outrageous. This legislation is not designed, nor was it intended to address those other problems. That's why the blight bill failed, because it was trying to address too many issues at the same time. So having said that, somebody asked a fact question, because one thing is for sure, everybody has their own opinions, and the facts that you see depend on where you're looking at it from. And so everybody's opinion is as good as everybody else. But I will share one fact with one of the early speakers. Back in the year 2000 or something like that, I was concerned as a member of city council at large, I was concerned about how Wilmington Housing Authority properties didn't seem to be kept up. And I had a problem with that. And so I did something about it. So I called my State Representative Arthur Scott, one of the best elected officials ever in Wilmington City Council from the 4th District. And at that time, he had become a state rep. And I said to him, look, folks are having an argument about whether city laws apply to Wilmington Housing Authority property. And I asked him, could he have that clarified and made so that their private property was subject to our laws? And so unless it has been removed from the code, there, back in 2000, there's House Bill number 241. And it was basically called Inspection of Housing Projects Located Within the City of Wilmington. And that's section 4323 in Title 31. So the person who asked about that, go to Title 31, Delaware Code, section 4323. And if that is still on the books, then that there answers the question. But at that time, Dover voted that their properties were subject to the city's laws. Now, if there's been federal or state preemption, I don't know, but that's a starting point to your question. That was put on the books. The other thing is that, you know, a lot of times folks can use whatever adjectives that they want to use expressing how they feel. But at the same time, it's pretty much a understanding in America that legislative bodies basically establish policy and that executive branches then execute that policy. They are the administrators. And so if the legislative branch passes legislation and the mayor signs it or it comes into law without his signature, establishing a pre-rental inspection program, then the executive branch under the leadership of the mayor and Jeff Starkey, their job is to put in place the procedures and things that they need. If they want to establish goals and timelines to respond, they have a rule-making authority in the code. And most departments, usually when they have policies that they have to implement, they then put in place, okay, how are we going to do this? So they already have 4 people that were made available for 4 years. Okay, they have a budget process coming up. They're in the middle of COVID. So they're going to have some policy. They may already have a policy on how they do inspections while COVID is at certain alert levels. So a lot of the things that folks were saying, every executive person can just say, oh, we can't do it because we don't want to do it. They can say that. You have to ask them if you want to know how they're going to implement it, but they don't work like that. If they wanted to explain what they were going to do, they've had opportunity since this was first introduced and held to say, well, you know, how would we implement that? But they know how they would implement it. This is nothing new for laws to be passed, policies that executive branches have to implement, and then they implement it. And if they need some help, they come back and request the help. But they already have 4 people. So everybody who was saying, well, how they going to do it? How they going to do it? They can't do it. No, that's their job to do it. And anybody who's been in government, sometimes people make the policy and sometimes people implement the policy. So I've been on the executive side of government too, as a chief of staff in the county executive's office. And so policies come from the council and we have to figure out how to implement it and get it done. That's what executive branches do. So they can do it. The bigger question is, if they just don't want to do it, will they refuse to do it? And I can say to you that executive branches normally don't do that. They do everything they can do to fight it on the front end. But I would encourage all of you, if you see that it's passed, then when they start to create the rules and regulations to go with the implementation of the legislation, you should participate in the regulation making process. If this becomes a policy of the city of Wilmington, you should participate in that. And some of you all have solutions to the problem other than the pre-rental inspection that are worth looking into. But I'm not trying to load this very narrowly tailored policy with 1,000 tons of trying to solve other problematic policies. So you can call me whatever name it is that some of you wanted to call and your adjectives. but this is basically what happens in America, and it happened in 06, 07. Somebody mentioned Bud Friel. Bud Friel and his team took over control of city council during that period. And they were interested in making landlords happy at the expense of the renters, and they got rid of pre-rental. Prior to that, under Mayor Sills and Councilman Ortega, they implemented pre-rental inspection because at that time, they were concerned about addressing the needs of the renters, not necessarily at the expense of the landlords, but certainly in a way to make sure that renters weren't taken advantage of. So at different times, there's different interests. There's different stakeholders. Actually, the stakeholders normally don't change. It's really who the decision makers feel need to be helped. So the object isn't to hurt landlords, it's to protect renters, but it's also to provide a bright line. So when somebody makes a false accusation against a landlord, there's a record of the status. It's an audit, a fair playing field at the beginning of the business relationship. Somebody earlier mentioned the children that we talked about earlier. You know, we have kids in Wilmington. A lot of people don't know about it, but a whole lot of kids in Wilmington have lived over the years, especially during that period of time when the landlord's interest was able to get the elimination of pre-rental inspections. That was back when the issue of lead poisoning for children was a big issue. And the absence of pre-rental inspections really just helped that problem to exacerbate, and it did back then. And so this is really important for somebody to take a look, and the executive branch knows how to implement it. So that's all I could say. I respect everybody has their own opinion, and their opinion don't necessitate them calling me a name, but they can do it if they want to. That's all I have.
Thank you, Councilman Guy. Is there, I'll give Commissioner Starkey a chance, and then any last comment for a wrap up before we do a motion. Commissioner Starkey.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Just to follow up on, I think, a couple questions that came out. One from Don relative to once we identify properties that are substandard and we deal with the issues, then obviously we unfit that unit. We unfit that unit and we send out a violation for that landlord to correct the violations. Oftentimes, when we go to tenant complaints, we find that landlords don't have licenses. So that's a way of picking them up as well. But again, I speak from the capacity of, from a perspective of capacity issues, from an operational standpoint. And right now, we don't have the capacity to keep up with the volume. If you're having 18,000 units that need to be inspected. And not only do the units have to be inspected, they have to be followed up with paperwork. So you're doing inspections and paperwork to follow up on. But the more important thing is that, you know, we're going to tie up between 80 and 90% of these inspectors' time if this was to pass. And they won't have opportunity to do anything else but pre-rental inspections. So all of the complaints that come in from council members relative to trash and issues and sanitation, those issues will be, you know, put to the wayside as we deal with this pre-rental inspection. Just merely from the capacity standpoint. Capacity is just enormous, and I just don't think people understand that capacity issue, trying to keep up with the workload. And that's my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And then also, I think, can you answer the question regarding the Section 8 inspection and the how many percentage of unregistered properties you hear from?
Well, right now, we try to work something out with WHA with the Section 8 inspection, but we just never put it all together. With Mr. Hill, we were trying to coordinate inspections. They kind of pair our inspector with their inspector to make sure that we're capturing the same thing. That's just something certain we can look at, but we just never had an opportunity to do that. What was the other question?
And the other one was, what's the percentage of unregistered properties that you get calls from?
Good question. I don't have a number, but there are a lot of unregistered properties out there. We're constantly picking them up. We picked up probably 1,000 last year just by combing the database. And I mentioned this in the committee meeting last time. Just looking at the database in terms of addresses and LLCs, we pick up a lot just as a result of that. But there are tons of them still out there.
Thank you, Commissioner.
You're welcome.
Is there any last comment from council members? All right, Councilman Guy, I'll give you a last chance to say words on the legislation prior to a motion.
Yes, I'm satisfied from all of the meetings that we had, the meetings which is just your subcommittee that led to the Section F amendment. And I appreciate all the people who had something to say. And I hope all of what folks had to say doesn't get lost, because there's going to be times when those particular problems may need the solutions to those particular problems. But in summary, the people who don't have a voice, in my view, when it comes to the policy table, are the renters. It's not that they can't come participate. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying they don't really have a voice. And when they had a voice in a pre-rental program, there were people who worked together to get rid of pre-rental inspections. And so I'm not going to allow the statement to be made without presenting the opposite point of view. And that is, pre-rental inspections didn't fail. Pre-rental inspections were eliminated for the benefit of a group that had the power to have the people in place get rid of it. And so once it was gone, it has aided in the deterioration of rental properties. So that's all I have, but there are renters. That's what I want to remind everybody on this call, because the renters may have been the least talked about group of people during this whole process. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Guy. I am going to entertain a motion to move ordinance 20-7 out of committee.
So
With
moved.
the amendment.
With the, I'm sorry, Councilman Guy, with the amendment also attached to the legislation.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Non-voting? All right, this ordinance has been passed out of committee, and it will be, I'm assuming, because it's coming out now, most likely it doesn't have a date on it. So I'm assuming that it will be December 10th. Do you know, Chief of Staff, do you know what date it will be on the agenda?
Madam,
December 10th.
It was December 10th? Okay.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, why can't it be on December 3rd meeting?
I'm unclear. So unless count,
Yeah, we have time. We have time.
Marshall, do you have an answer to that, or?
Typically, what happens is the December 3rd Council agenda has already been set for the ordinances that are scheduled to come out of this committee. They're scheduled, they were planned to be scheduled for the December 10th council agenda.
Yeah, but thank you, Chief of Staff. But we can put that on the agenda by we're in time before you, so we can put that on the third agenda because we just had a resolution that's going on the third agenda as well. So
that was a resolution rather than an ordinance. And just so you know, I don't set the agenda. That will be the president.
okay, so can we, you as the Chief of Staff, you put on record that we wanted to be on December 3rd's agenda?
I will send the president a request for her to respond to your request.
Thank you, Marshall. Yes.
One thing, could you record the vote, because there's been efforts to try to stop legislation by saying it wasn't enough votes. So could you record what the vote was, the total? Sounds like it was unanimous.
Yes, it was a unanimous 5 committee members that are on the line.
Okay, thank you.
So as of right now, this will be on the agenda for December 10th, as the request is being put in for December 3rd. All right. That concludes our agenda for this evening. Reminder again, this is our last committee meeting for the year 2020. And thank you all for, I know it's been a long extended meeting this evening, but I thank you for participating in all the comments that everyone has made this evening to add into the dialogue for to make sure we have good legislation. So again, thank you. And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair.
Yes, Councilman Guy.
Are you having any meetings in January?
Yes, we'll be back in 2021.
Okay. Well, I just want to say, in case I'm not at that meeting, I want to just let you know that the 4 years of you chairing this committee, you've done an exceptional job of being fair with every citizen and council member and everybody, and that's appreciated in case this is the last meeting. So thank you for your service.
Thank you, Councilman Guy. All right. I will entertain a motion to adjourn, and we'll see you in the new year.
So moved.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Good night.
Rahima?
Yes.
Did you get my comment I sent in the email regarding trying to follow up with Commissioner Williams regarding to get a final copy?
A copy of the agreement once it's finalized. I did.
Okay, perfect.
I just, I'm glad that Councilman Guy asked about the vote because I can't see or hear everybody.
Yeah.
So I did write down that the members who were present, 5 members at the time.
Yes.
Voted yes.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Yes, and I did see your chat.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll take care of that.
You guys, thank you guys. Have a good night.
You too.